Okay, so it is the end of the Halloween day. We had a very full day at the shop. We did close a little early than normal, just because I wanted to make sure that all our employees and everybody else had an opportunity to spend and share Halloween with family and friends and stuff. So we closed up at 10 o'clock, and so the owners took the late shift. But we did have a little something that we're going to do for some of the older folks that we did. Actually, we did this last night, and we had a special screening of my favorite movie of all time. But before we do that, I know, Jaime, we've talked to another silent owner as well of the business.
Yes.
So I asked Denise to join us from Film to Table. So
I just stopped by to bring snacks.
Right.
I didn't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you were cooking last night for everybody when we did the showing last night. So but yeah, so I guess I should, as always, because I forget, and we're getting better at this. My name is Eli.
And Jaime.
I'm Denise. I'm not sure what I'm doing here.
Right.
Here I am.
But this
They
is...
locked the door behind me.
Yes. It's okay. It's fine.
Oh.
But this is Top Shelf Video, and this is also Film to Table, the Joni Loves Chachi mix-up, mashup.
Nobody is going to know what that means.
Okay, Silver Spoons.
I barely know what that means.
Silver Spoons? Wasn't Silver Spoons like a crossover from...
Family Ties? No.
No. Wasn't Silver Spoons like a crossover from the Moving On Up to the Jeffersons?
Jeffersons?
Wasn't it?
I never watched any of those shows.
It was. Okay, so when MacGyver was on the A-Team, I don't know.
Wait, was he really?
I don't know. I just made it up right now.
Oh, okay.
But that would have been awesome.
That would have been
awesome.
It's like G.I. Joe Transformers. I'm pretty sure that did happen.
Okay.
Oh,
there's that.
that sounds like it could have been a thing.
Yeah.
It was a thing.
Yeah.
And it probably supposed to be a thing in the future. I don't know. I don't care.
Sure.
Anyway, all that to say that this is the super crossover episode because last night we showed the staff my favorite film from 1974 that is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. Maybe, I don't know how else to say, the reigning champion of grindhouse horror, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Super non-biased opinion.
No.
Yeah. It's on the Mount Rushmore of
okay.
The genre.
It is, and it's also in this house. It is. I probably have. It's funny because I think my friend Noel last mentioned. He's like, "Man, you have the same problem I have with like Planet of the Apes," because he's like a huge fan. But
nice.
I have 2 posters in this office. I have a chainsaw behind me. I have a rock from the original building.
A literal piece of cement.
What, we got like 2 posters in the movie room. Texas Chainsaw.
No, it can't be just 2.
Handful of shirts.
A handful of shirts.
Yeah.
Most of your shirts.
Anyway, all that to say that Texas Chainsaw Massacre is easily my favorite movie of all time, and I felt that was appropriate for Halloween. And yeah, I wanted to talk about it because there is, I feel like without a doubt, if there was ever a video store rental movie that was the ultimate, hey, let's try to get everybody all scared up tonight and make a rental and figure out what we want to do. Let's do that. And I feel like this is that movie.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? Like, what are
I think when you look up horror, or when you look this up in like Webster's dictionary, there's a picture of this movie. You know,
when you look up horror.
Yeah. Like you said, like the grindhouse horror, you know, when you look that up, it'll say "See Texas Chainsaw Massacre" is the definition, and then that so.
Just like a link to the IMDb page.
I think without this movie, there are not others.
Oh, that's a good point, actually.
No, this is probably it's funny because like from the outside, and I think obviously this movie is very polarizing in the way, like not only just in the movie itself, but in like the title.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it was banned in the UK as part of the Video Nasties, almost on like title alone. I don't even think, there were a lot of people that had not even seen it, and they just knew that Texas Chainsaw Massacre was going to be banned in the UK as part of like Margaret Thatcher's, I think it was Margaret Thatcher and her like basically like her version of like Ronald Reagan's like deep censorship of just like we can't allow children to see these movies, and then it makes it that much more like coveted to see these movies.
Right.
So the more you tell somebody not to do something, the more they're going to want to do it.
Oh yeah, that's in human nature.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, right. Absolutely. And I feel like I don't know. I feel like for me, I think partly. I mean, I guess we'll kind of get into it. Like some of the things that I felt about some of this as like a young person, but even as I've gotten older, and like how it's kind of inspired me as like a creative person and whatnot. But I don't know. Do you remember the first time you watched this, Jaime?
No, I don't. And I've got to say,
you blocked it.
Well, no, it's not even that. I think. I was having this realization when we watched it together several weeks ago. I don't know that up until that weekend, I don't know that I had seen this movie from beginning to the end in its entirety. I think I'd just seen over the years all the like bits and pieces, but I think I had that realization that I was like, I don't think I've seen, like I don't think I've, as much as it's, it was such a, pop culture thing.
Yeah.
I think I don't want to say it's a Mandela effect because it's not that. I think but it's something along the lines of like, I've seen enough of the, every Halloween season, they have the 100 scariest moments. And then they have this other one, like those little shows that come on around this time of year. I think I had in my brain, I had pieced the entire movie together, but I had not seen it from beginning to end. I knew the premise. I know what happens. When the scenes come up, I'm like, yep, yeah. And it played in my brain like I'd seen it. But then I was like, I had that kind of conversation with myself. I'm like, I think that's the first time because there was a couple times where I was legitimately jump scared. Like the jump scare got me, and I was like, son of a bitch.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I knew that was going to happen. But then I was like, no, you know what? You have not seen this movie in its entirety. So I was so happy that night that we watched it. Yeah. Because I was like, it's checked off the block because I was like, all right, it's done.
Yeah.
It was such a good experience in your home setup.
Yeah. And I think it's funny because I have a very similar feeling about it too. I know I watched this too young because, and we'll talk about this a little bit later when we used to go hunting with Dad. Out like on the border and whatnot. Yeah. But
yeah.
I very much remember being scared about Leatherface coming out of like the brush.
Yeah.
But and like you said, I don't think it's I don't know if I use the word Mandela effect, but maybe the video store posters like scared me enough that I like imagined what I thought it was going to be in my head, and maybe I didn't see it until I was a little bit older.
Right.
And I just like literally like blocked it out of my head. But this movie was really one of those, like, it's so scary that I don't know. Like I almost had to dare myself to like want to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time I showed it to Denise, which I guess we'll talk about later, was probably, I mean, I don't know if Denise would agree or disagree, but like I'm surprised we're even married because of how I introduced her to the movie.
Was this your date night movie or something?
We'll get to that
okay.
a little bit later when we talk about food and stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, so I guess let's. I think that we've said in the past, like we're obviously not like film. This isn't like necessarily a film podcast where we have all this like deep trivia and all these things and whatnot. Like I haven't deep researched this movie other than like my own fandom.
Right.
But I will say there are quite a few things here that like are in a lot of ways special to me because like, you know, Hollywood is the place where films are made. But if there was anything that was ever like, don't mess with Texas and Texas made and Texas proud, like this movie was absolutely made in Texas. This movie was made by a Texas filmmaker, like a pot smoking Texas filmmaker, a hippie of the era, a UT Longhorn graduate. I mean, I don't know if it's, I mean, outside of having like, I don't know, like Matthew McConaughey in this, in like, I don't know how more Texas you can get in this movie. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's also like another reason why I am particularly like the cultural impact and like film impact that this movie had on film and just Hollywood and the era of, I guess you could say like the golden age of cinema when like the big movies were like kind of starting to go away, right? Like the Singing in the Rain and what's the other one? The Hills, the Hills.
The Sound of Music.
Sound of Music.
The Sound of Music.
Sound of Music.
The Hills Have Eyes.
The Hills Have Eyes.
Not that one.
Yeah, not that one.
That'd be a crazy mashup.
The Hills Have Eyes for music. So like that era of film was like starting to go away because large studios were starting to effectively die off. And the more scummy underground like part of Hollywood that they did not like, that was like really more the like almost like you could say like the Nirvana of like filmmakers with like Easy Rider and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. A lot of movies that were coming in that were like, these weren't necessarily like very well, like filmmakers that were like, oh, I've studied, this and that. Or they were more like hands on the ground. Like let's just kind of like get down and dirty and let's just make these movies and tell our stories the way we need to tell them. And if horror is the avenue to get there, then let's do that. And so I feel like, I don't know, there's so much about this movie that I love, not just because it's horror, but also because of how it was made and a lot of things that kind of went into it. So, I guess, just the quick premise of the movie, which is basically like, it's the summer of the 70s, and you have a group of friends that are basically just out to have a good weekend. But, recently there was like a potential grave situation where graves were disturbed, and so one of the brother and sisters want to go see if Grandpa's grave has been disturbed, and so they decide to go stop off by a cemetery to go check on Grandpa's grave on their way to basically just go have a fun weekend at an abandoned house, revisiting
the house they grew up in,
or
a family house or something.
Yeah, and just basically be kids for the weekend. And but they unfortunately run into the wrong people, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that's the movie. Like it's as plain Jane as like something actually kind of gets. IMDb actually reads this as 5 friends head out to rural Texas to visit the grave of a grandfather. On their way, they stumble across what appears to be a deserted house, only to discover something sinister within, something armed with a chainsaw. Like, I don't know. It's pretty weak.
Yeah, it could have been better.
For IMDb. But that's what they put there. So yeah, the movie's directed by Tobe Hooper. It stars
R.I.P.
Yeah, R.I.P. It stars Marilyn Burns, also R.I.P.
R.I.P.
Let's see. Marilyn Burns, Terry McMinn, who plays Pam, Alan Danziger, plays Jerry. Yeah, Danziger. Paul Partine, who plays Franklin. William Vale, who plays Kurt. And then Ed Neal, who plays Hitchhiker. Jim Sidow is the old man, and Gunnar Hansen is Leatherface. I think Gunnar Hansen is Nordic or no, he's from. I'm pretty sure he's from Norway. Yeah. So that is basically like that is the premise of the movie, or very very simple, like classic. I think what starts the horror genre of like kids traveling where they shouldn't be, or snooping around where they shouldn't be, going down the wrong road that they shouldn't go down, and that's effectively like this movie. But yeah, so I guess you and I watched this. Jaime, and Denise unfortunately has watched this probably as many times as I've forced her to watch this. I can't think of the number of times that I've seen this.
I mean, you watch it probably at least once every month, at least.
No, not once every month.
Averaging.
Oh, okay.
Maybe.
Okay, maybe I guess if you're averaging, because I guess I do watch it a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
I figured I figured you'd pop it out more like in the Halloween season, kind of just play in the background kind of thing.
You would think that. I like watching it in the summer because when it's hot, this movie like makes you think of the summer.
Or just he'll have it on the background when he's working or doing. I don't know. It's
okay.
It's never. I don't know. It's never a surprise when it's on TV.
Yeah. So yes, I do watch it a lot. But I will say it's not so much because I am like a horror fiend, because I will say this movie doesn't actually have as much horror as you would actually think. I really like the fact that this movie has
a bold statement.
Well, I can explain. And I think you know this too, so don't act surprised.
Yeah, it doesn't have as much gore as I thought it would have.
Yes,
in my brain.
It is not a gory movie.
Because a chainsaw just equates,
right.
shit everywhere.
Right.
And the way it was filmed, there's not a lot of, guts, like these days, they want to go all crazy.
Yeah.
No, it was filmed really, it left a lot to the imagination.
Right.
Which was awesome.
And I think that's what makes it like really, really good. So the movie starts, and it's kind of funny because I think some people didn't actually realize this, or some people kind of debate this, but the movie sort of starts with like, obviously the movie starts with the Star Wars like running sort of title, which I will say like, that is like probably, as weird as it sounds, that's like one of my favorite things about this movie, because especially as a kid, the way it sort of played out is like, I actually did think that this was like a real movie, like, or it was like a real story.
Yeah.
Because they tell you that, like, and
they give you specific dates. They give you everything to imply that it really happened.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just kind of felt very documentary from that standpoint, like very early. Mm-hmm. That like whatever you're about to see, is the account of this and that or whatever. And yeah, I always loved that as like, even now, like when I did my short film, I wanted to make sure I included some sort of homage to that, because I like the idea of somebody telling you, this is a true story.
Yeah.
And then like when the internet came around, people were like, no, it's not a true story. It's like, I know, but that takes the fun out of it. Like, can we not just like pretend for a while? And so then true story turned into based on actual events. And then it's like, okay, so you're just like opening up that term a little bit, but at the end of the day though, right, it's like none of this is real. So I love the intro. It's very like, it's sort of Star Wars-esque in a way. But then the movie sort of starts with like that weird snappy sound and like the little like light bulb flash in, and you see like you see what kind of looks like a gruesome sort of
like a crime scene. Yeah.
And I think so. I think a lot of people get this like this confused or don't really think about. I mean, granted, I guess you have to watch it as many times as I do, but that is actually the sound of the hitchhiker when he is like when he's pulling bodies out from the grave. Like all those sounds is him with his camera taking pictures of the stuff that he would, like the grave robbing that he was doing. Because in this 4K version that we listened to or that we watched, like you can hear the shovel like going into the ground and like all the stuff that he's kind of doing, and you can kind of hear him breathing, and you can hear like, it's almost like he's doing this at night and shuffling stuff around and kind of moving things around. And so all that is really him, because then the first shot we see after like the main title is when the bodies are all like sort of tied together, and there's like this statue body thing that's been put on top of a grave.
Right.
And that was basically him, right? Like he was doing all that at night when nobody saw him. And so he was piecing together this like sort of this body statue thing that you see right at the onset.
Yeah. Isn't there like a radio there's like a it sounds like there's a radio like news going on in the background, kind of talking about the grave robbing that's happening, and then it's coinciding with the whole seeing the bones, kind of like and the flash and the
Yeah, and that also gives it that sort of documentary feel, like that sort of like somebody narrating, but also not narrating the movie you're about to watch. You're just like hearing, you're just hearing this from the perspective of like, you're kind of catching all this as it kind of goes. Yeah. So hearing like the radio guy is like kind of cool. Yeah. Or I like that, sort of aspect of it. You kind of get all that sort of feel. So, right on from the beginning of the movie, we're in the van with like all the kids, Sally, Jerry, Franklin, Kurt, Pam. They're all in their, I don't know, I guess, what is that? Like a mystery machine? Like, it's not like a,
it's like a hippie van.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like a hippie van.
Kind of grungy looking.
I guess it's kind of a van of the day.
Well, it's like they're it doesn't say how old they are, but they're probably like, I don't know, college students, and probably cost like $50 to buy that van or something.
Well, yeah.
I don't know how it works. I don't know. I'm assuming it was really cheap. It looked really cheap anyway.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And so we get introduced to, it's kind of funny because like, they pull over so that Franklin, who's the brother who's in a wheelchair, can use the bathroom on the side of the road in a coffee can. And as weird as it sounds, that was actually more common back then than I guess people realized. Mm-hmm.
Which part?
Peeing on the side of the road, like just pulling over and peeing.
Oh.
That was very much a thing that we did on road trips because
were there not rest stops?
There were not as many rest stops as there are now, and gas stations and things like that. Because I mean, I don't know how many times. I mean, I'm sure Jaime remembers this, but there were plenty of times that we were, when you got 3 kids and you're driving from like where we grew up to San Antonio, which is what, like 4 hours.
4 hours.
And there aren't that many like bathrooms along the way, and you really got to go. And your parents are like really angry, and they're like, "Fine, we'll just pull over. I'm gonna open the door, and you're gonna pee right there in the corner, like where nobody can see you, just there on the side of the road." And because I mean, there really wasn't much. We didn't really have. Nowadays, there's like gas stations. I feel like
Buc-ee's every 50 miles.
Oh yeah, there are plenty of places.
Yeah, there wasn't as many. The long rural stretches of road where. I mean, obviously, the state of Texas, and I'm sure everywhere else is, grown, but yeah, that was, I mean, hell, we grew up in a house that was off a dirt road. And by the time we all left high school, there was now a high school across the street, paved roads. I mean, like this civilization caught up with the rural area where we were. I mean, we grew up with, there were like, roosters, in the morning. It was out in the rural, South Texas, and now it's just as suburban as, everywhere else.
A lot of other places. Yeah. And so when you see Franklin, using the restroom at the very beginning, like it was kind of funny every time I see that, because I don't know, it just makes me think of the number of times that like mom and dad would have to stop for us, and having to use the restroom and whatnot. But, so the gang is on their way to like the cemetery to go check on their grandpa, which is Pam and Franklin, our brother and sister.
Sally and Franklin.
Or I'm sorry, Sally and Franklin are our brother and sister, and they're the ones that want to go check on their grandpa. Jerry is I think Jerry is with Pam, and Kirk is with Sally. I think is the dating sort of the dating lineup there. So they swing by the cemetery. You kind of get this like you get your first sense of like rural Texas with the guys wearing the cowboy hats and like doing the what most Texans do, which is I guess drink beer at the cemetery and just kind of hang out
in the middle of the day.
Yeah, with our guns on the back then that was like again it was like that period where like you just had guns like hanging out in the back of your truck.
Oh
like,
there were gun racks. Yeah, there were gun racks in the trucks
on the back of your truck. Yeah, so you could see the gun while you're driving, which is wow, it's just an interesting time we grew up in, where you could just show your arms. But anyway, like so that's kind of going on at the cemetery.
I mean, we're still in Texas. Is it that much different?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like you probably have neon lights, I guess, around your guns now to kind of show them off. But and like a cowboy logo or something, like Dallas Cowboy logo or something on them. But so from there they decide that everything's fine there. Let's just kind of keep trucking to where we're gonna go to the old house, the old I don't know, it looked kind of like a mansion or a it was a pretty nice
decent sized
house,
2-story
house that they were kind of going to, but. It was kind of interesting because like it was abandoned and overgrown. Like I was like, man, how long have they been gone? Like it's just kind of interesting because I mean they're not that old, or at least they're not supposed to be that old. So on their way there, they stop off to get some gas because they're a little worried that they strayed a little far away from Austin. And I think at some point they may mention that they're from Austin or they're in the Austin area or. They're in the hill country, maybe. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously that's where they filmed it. But I want to say, unless I'm thinking one of the many other Texas Chainsaw movies.
I don't know that they specifically say Austin or even Texas. I mean, obviously the title says Texas Chainsaw, but I don't even think they say Texas at any point in time.
No, I want to say like on the radio, like you.
Yeah, it's true.
They do mention
maybe in the beginning, the scroll.
Yeah. But on their way to the house of Sally and Franklin, they stop off at the gas station to get some gas, and that's the first time they run into, I guess Jim Sadow's or Sadow, who I guess in the it's kind of interesting because IMDb has him listed as the old man, but he's not really like supposed to be that old. He is the gas station attendant. And
is he the dad? He's the dad, though, right?
That is not the dad. I think that's where there's like a lot of confusion.
He's not the dad of Leatherface and the hitchhiker.
No,
see, I thought he was too.
I just had always assumed.
I mean, he's listed as old man, but he's the older of all the other characters.
He's
younger than Grandpa.
Yes, yeah, he is. So, So for the family side of the Leatherface family or the
the Leatherface.
Sorry, I'm forgetting the name.
The clan, the Leatherface clan.
Yeah. Man, I don't know why I'm forgetting the name of the Sawyers.
There you go. I was like, it's with an S. What is it?
Yeah. So the Sawyers. So basically, like, I guess I've always referred to him as the cook. He is the older brother, and then the hitchhiker, who is the younger brother he's the younger brother of the cook, and then Leatherface is, I think, like he's supposed to be, I think, the baby of the brothers.
Oh, I totally never got that.
Yeah, well, and the reason why, and this kind of jumping a little bit ahead, but I mean, it is what it is. The reason why I know that is his brother, because there's a scene where like Leatherface gets through the door and he yells about how his brother ruined the door, and so like.
Well, yeah, but I think that's why
maybe that's why people
that he's the dad.
But he's not.
Because he's yelling as if like he's,
they're all brothers. Is what the case is. So I guess kind of going back to like where the so they stop off at the gas station and try to get some gas, but it turns out, and I guess this was a common thing in the 70s, right? Like not everybody always had not everybody had gas available because we were like in a bit of a gas shortage, and gas wasn't always readily available. And so they basically tell the kids, like, hey, we don't have gas. Like, and so they're asking, hey, how do we get to the old Franklin property or whatever? And, the old man's, or I guess the cook or the gas station attendant's kind of like, yeah, you don't want to be messing around there. Like, you don't want to be messing around with people's, like, property, and you shouldn't be doing that. And kids shouldn't be messing around with that kind of stuff. And it's kind of funny because in that scene also, I love, Tobe Hooper always talked about, to him, he thought this movie was supposed to be more of a comedy than it was a horror movie. Huh. Like that was his sort of vision, which is like very, very cryptic for somebody to kind of think that way. But I always laugh in this scene because when the gas station attendant comes out, there's like that guy who, I don't know who he is, but he comes out with like a little wash bucket and a rag. And he comes out and he starts like washing the front of the van, and he's like washing the, the window. And, he's talking to the kids in the car about like, we don't have any gas. We don't got, this or that. And then so he turns around, starts walking back. And then the guy with the bucket starts walking back with him like a little like lost dog, kind of like walking back with him. Yeah. And then they call him back again, and he turns around, and the guy with the bucket like turns around and comes back, and he keeps just kind of like following this guy, and he starts like washing the van again. And it's like, it actually is very comical when you watch it again, even though like the guy has a very interesting look. Like he's kind of got this big like forehead, and I don't know, he's kind of got like a little bit of a hunchback of Notre Dame kind of look to him, because he's kind of hunched over and he's just kind of doing this stuff back and forth. But yeah, in any case, so they stop off to get some barbecue there because the owner or the gas station attendant, tells them like, hey, why don't you guys just hang around till the gas truck comes, and I got some barbecue and you guys can have some of that. And they were like, no, we're gonna keep on moving. And so it kind of like, I think that scene in a lot of ways for me also starts to set up, and it doesn't really translate very well, like in terms of like a modern update, but like maybe you and I probably feel this a little bit more because we grew up here. But like when you see a little gas station like that, that usually means you're out in the middle of nowhere. Like, oh yeah, you don't see a gas station like that next to like a 7-Eleven or I guess back then would have been like a Texaco or a Shell gas station, like if you see a small like gas station the way that looked, I mean, you're kind of now you're out in the middle. You're miles from like the big road, or you're miles from where like the city is,
Cell phone signal doesn't exist out there.
Oh yeah. Well, hell yeah. Even back then it's like, because obviously the cell phone's not even a thing, but even having a telephone line out there is maybe not really a thing, because I mean, just like internet or anything now, you got to run that cable out there. And if nobody's running like cable off the main farm road or main like interstate or whatever, and there's no cable or there's no telephone line, then you don't have a phone. Like you have to drive to like the next major gas station to get like an actual phone call through or something. And I think that's something that, you don't necessarily see that in the movie, but I don't know. I feel like I kind of know that, and I think it's more instinctive. Because I've heard people say like, well, why did they just like, when things start going bad, why don't they just go, back into the city or whatever? I was like, where? Dude, you were like miles from the city.
That's why they needed gas, because they knew that they were past that point where, if there's no gas, you're not getting back.
Right.
So,
is it still like that? There's that stretch of road between, like my sister and I went on a road trip once to South Padre Island, and that whole like stretch of King Ranch, that's still like no lights, no gas station kind of. Because we were, and we didn't know any better because Google Maps wasn't a thing the last time we went down there. That's how long it's been. But when we went down there, as soon as we kind of realized we were around that King Ranch area, we were maybe like had a quarter tank. So we're like, that's plenty of gas. I don't think it's going to be too much further, so we should be all right. Or there's bound to be, like you're just saying, there's bound to be a gas station or a city at the end of this stretch of road. And that road, once it's dark and there's no lights, there's no buildings, there's nothing. And it was about to get dark by the time we started driving into that area. It was genuinely kind of terrifying because we're like, I don't know what we're going to do if we get stuck out here with no gas. Yeah. There's no, I mean, there was a little bit of traffic, but
there's not much.
There wasn't a whole lot. I don't know. Maybe people were avoiding that area.
No. And I was going to bring that up as well, too, because Jaime is familiar with that. And I think for anybody that's listening, there is a stretch between south of San Antonio, south of Corpus Christi, or right near Corpus Christi, south of Corpus Christi to basically the border, which is where we grew up. That is about, there's about 45 minutes.
So long.
There's 45, I think, between Corpus Christi and the Rio Grande Valley, I think it's like an hour and a half.
It's an hour and a half, more or less, yeah.
Right. So there's about a good 15 or 20 minute stretch in there that you're referring to, which is the King Ranch, which literally is everything you see in Texas Chainsaw Massacre is actually there.
Isn't it like a no-fly zone over that too? It's definitely like a secret government compound, right?
Yeah.
It has to be.
I'm pretty sure
that's one of those urban legend things. I don't know that.
There's a lot of urban legends that go on with that area.
I mean, because that's where they keep the aliens, right?
Right. Well, yeah, and
there's nuclear missile silos. I've heard so much shit about that area.
I mean, it has to be. There's no lights. There's no gas stations. Nobody can build houses over there. There's no way that's like a ranch.
Yeah, the state has built 2 roads that go through there, but there are no gas stations. I think there's even signs that tell you like. Last place to gas up before
for 50 miles.
And we did. I do remember seeing that
Those
sign,
signs
and
are
we're
out
like,
there to be like,
"Oh, I'm sure that's fine. I'm sure that can't be true anymore. That can't be right. It's 2000 and something, like that." Yeah,
and it's so like desolate. Like you were saying, like the state hasn't really run any power through there, so like there are no lights. And so when it gets dark at night, it is legitimately dark and is legitimately
kind of
scary.
Yeah.
So the
aliens can find us.
Yeah, all that brush and stuff that you see in this movie, like that is all the stuff that's to your right and to your left when you're driving down that road.
Oh, it's horrible.
And it is actually quite scary if you do break down there, because nowadays, like no one's going to stop to like give you a hand. I mean, I'm not going to stop and help anybody in the middle of like that. You know, like.
You get signal down there, but you can't get.
You don't get a really good signal because there are no towers there either.
Aliens.
Yeah, like Jaime was saying, and I'm sure you've heard that too. There are tons of urban legends about the King Ranch area because, I mean, as weird as it is, I know that whenever I would fly from the valley back to Austin or to like Dallas, you don't fly over that area. You fly like over the water. And then you come in like through Houston or whatever. And then if you do fly over that area, you go really, really high. And then you come down really, really low. And I always thought that was kind of weird, but I don't know. Maybe there's some sort of explanation for that.
Something going on down there. But that's definitely Leatherface territory.
Yes. All that to say, if you see a gas station that looks like the one in Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
keep driving.
You better make sure that you got some backup gas somewhere.
Keep driving.
Or if you're in a Tesla, like I am just.
Oh, there's no charging station out in that shit. No.
Yep. So they don't get any gas, but they do get some barbecue. And then along one point there, they decide that there's a hitchhiker on the side of the road. Again, it being the 70s, they're like,
oh, it's totally fine.
Yeah, they're like, hey, there's a hitchhiker. Should we pick him up? And they're like, yeah, man, he's gonna he's gonna die out here. Yeah, Texas heat. Which, to be fair,
probably true.
It's probably very true. Like, maybe not as hot as it has been in our recent times, but Texas has always been hot. Yeah. There's no doubt about that.
Oh yeah.
So they decide to pick up the hitchhiker, who's just listed as the hitchhiker, who's Ed Neal. So when the hitchhiker, when they pick up the hitchhiker, basically they talk about how or he kind of talks to the group about how he used to work at the slaughterhouse, and Franklin, who's very annoying throughout this movie, but also is kind of like us as the viewer, because he's kind of the one that's asking a lot of the questions and kind of the most like in like investigating sort of the situation and whatnot. Yeah. But he starts talking to him. He's like, oh, my grandpa used to work at the slaughter mill. And, he's like, did he used to use the sledgehammer or like the machine or whatever? He's like, no. Like that new machine, it's no good. The air gun, that's no good. It takes away jobs. He's like, sledgehammer, that's the way to do it. And he's like telling him about his time at the slaughterhouse. Yeah.
He's talking, then he pulls out some Polaroids to show them.
Yeah. Of the slaughterhouse. Yeah. And I feel like it's kind of funny because, again, like this movie, I wouldn't say it has a lot to say, but a lot of times people will say like, oh, this movie really speaks to the era of like how bad like the economy was and like jobs and stuff like that, because like they are talking a little bit about like, in a lot of ways, like how industrialization of these air guns have made jobs much easier or more humane to kill like animals, but people like the hitchhiker and people like that like basically are good at using a sledgehammer to swack like a cow on the head and kill it. Like those things are not really like how we want society to be, but because like the evolution of technology and stuff like that is coming along, like those people are not needed. Yeah. And so you're starting to set up this idea, right? That like, if you run into people like out in the rural area like this, it might not be like the best idea to try to, push your thoughts or like your, sort of like, well, isn't it more humane to do it that way? It's like, no, like you want to use a sledge, you want to take them out, and it's funny because in retrospect, like as like an older adult, I start to see a little bit more of the messaging between these are like city college kids, a lot more like nowadays they would be maybe a lot more annoying and different because they'd have phones and like they'd probably be talking, about this or that or whatever. But even though these kids weren't necessarily doing that, there is like a very stark contrast, right, between this guy who's like, man, I don't know, I hit cows in the head with a sledgehammer. Yeah. And then these guys are like just kind of drinking and having a good time and kind of, goofing around and not really thinking about the fact that they may not have jobs when they're done with college or whatever, and stuff like that. So it's an interesting, like a lot of people will say like this movie really speaks to that. I never saw that the first couple times. And then I started to see it more as I watched the movie a little bit more of like city people and like rural people, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. And maybe it was more apparent if you were like actually living in that area, right? Like I think, you were like you were like 1 year old when this movie came out, and I wasn't even born yet. So when I saw it, like I'm sure in the 80s, like I wasn't really picking up on these deeper like messages and symbolism of like trying to distinguish two different like groups of people. Right. So that whole like interchange when the hitchhiker is in the van and he's like with Franklin and kind of, I guess he's kind of picked out Franklin because Franklin's asking all the questions. And then he's like, well, yeah, the sledgehammer's better and then all this and that. And then he starts like taking pictures and of them in there. And then, he takes Franklin's knife away from him and he sort of like has it in his hand and sort of plays with it, but then he cuts his hand with it and then gives it back to Franklin, which is kind of funny. But at the same time, like there's something weird about that sort of like type of person, that just kind of does this sort of weird things. And,
those self-mutilation kind of, they were freaked out.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's also maybe a slight insinuation too that, especially with the way he's dressed, that like the hitchhiker may have been like a Vietnam vet or may have been like in the army, because he's kind of wearing that green army, like sort of like green top, like
Oh, right.
it's not a like it's not an actual like what do you call it? What do you call those when in the army, like when you have like your actual like
Fatigues.
your fatigues. So I don't think it's actual like I don't think it was actual fatigues, but it did look very reminiscent to me of like sort of like the army kind of green or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think like you sort of get that impression in the second movie for sure that he was like a Vietnam vet, even though I don't think it's supposed to be the same character, but it might be. But in any case, so yeah, he's acting all weird and he pulls out like his razor blade. Like he's got like a legit like
like a
shaving,
razor,
like a straight razor. And so then this one things get like really, really hairy. And then like he performs like some sort of voodoo on like the picture that he's taken of Franklin, and Franklin doesn't want to buy it. And everybody's really now starting to freak out in the van. And it's just like, man, what the hell's going on? And after he kind of pulls out like his straight razor, and he burns the picture of Franklin, which is a really weird, like I said, sort of like almost ritualistic, like witch kind of moment. Like he puts sort of like
puts some like gunpowder or something.
Yeah, or
which
something.
Is weird that he has gunpowder.
Yeah,
just in his bag, but
yeah.
Okay.
Well, again, I think it just kind of speaks to those types of people, right? That are just like they just, like his little bag was made of like it looked like squirrels and other like roadkill. Like his bag was just kind of made of stuff that he probably stitched together. Because little do we know like who he is at this point in the movie. But so yeah, he ends up cutting Franklin with the razor on his hand, and then they kind of like kick him out of the van, and they're all freaked out. And then they kind of leave him there. But I think you get like a real sense of like, these are the types of people that are going to be in Texas, like out in the middle of nowhere. And I think in a lot of ways, I mean, granted, there were some other movies that like, I'd have to look up dates, but I mean, I'm sure there are other movies that sort of speak to this, but that is, I feel like the first time you get a real sense of like, what I guess would be like hillbilly exploitation or like redneck exploitation of people that like you really should let people like that just let them be.
Yeah.
And don't really mess around with like, areas that are not your area or whatever.
Yeah. Just very dirty and kind of like uneducated and a certain, and you just don't like complete polar opposite of like the city kids,
Yeah, absolutely.
They're just
like
dirty,
education,
grimy.
Versus non-educated, like you were saying, and just sort of like, there's just that huge distinction between the two. And so, they eventually make their way to like the house where Franklin and Sally are from. And so they kind of make it there, and they kind of just start like kids do. I guess they just kind of like frolic around, and they're just kind of looking at the place and messing around. And I would imagine that they probably had like a joint, or they probably had some alcohol or beer or something probably for later or whatever, that they probably brought with them in the van. Or I don't know, like maybe they were going to like stay there the night, and just kind of mess around for the night. I mean, who didn't do that as a kid, when you had the opportunity to kind of mess around?
Oh yeah.
And, yeah. Whether it was like the water tower or like, places that we knew back home where it's like, well, the cops never go here or whatever. And you can kind of go and hang out or whatever. So they eventually make their way to the house. When they're at the house, the groups kind of break up a little bit because, I guess,
they're couples. Yeah.
Yeah. The couples kind of break up, and Pam and Jerry, or no, Pam and Kurt.
Yeah.
Make their way they're looking for the watering hole.
That's right. And Franklin says, it's out that way. Yeah. Yeah.
It's somewhere out back. And they leave Franklin and Sally and Jerry in the house, by themselves. And, it's kind of funny because I also kind of remember being out with like, some of the uncles that we grew up with. And like, there's areas out there where they were just things like that where you probably shouldn't have been messing around with, like who knows where that water's been, or, the fact that they're going to a watering hole, doesn't really seem all that like good of an idea to begin with. But they go out there, and lo and behold, it turns out that the Earth actually is getting warmer because there is no watering hole. Like, it's been dried up. It turns out that the summer is just way too hot. So when they get down there, they're like, "Oh man, there's no water. There's no water hole. There's nowhere to swim. There's nothing to do. It's just a bunch of overgrown grass and a bunch of trees and brush." So they're kind of messing around out there and just checking their way, and they see or hear off in the distance a house out in the middle of nowhere. And
they hear a motor or like an engine.
Yeah, they hear like a generator or something. Yeah. And so Kurt is like, "Hey, I hear something. We should go out that way." And he's like, "Oh man, like maybe
they got gas.
Maybe they got some gas because I hear a generator, so they got to have gas. And maybe I can, give them a couple bucks or give them like my guitar or whatever, and I'll leave it with them, and then I can come back and give them some more money, and I get my guitar back, and we just need a little bit of gas to make sure we can get home or whatever." So they eventually make their way to what is just what appears to be a house, but very quickly, I guess even nowadays, you would probably be like, "Huh, none of this seems like really well," because they have like, I guess what is that, like army, like camo netting?
Camo netting, yeah.
Yeah, because they're covering up a bunch of cars that they just have sitting out back. And you start to, like, I mean, nowadays, I think you would kind of be like, "Huh, that's interesting." But these kids are like, "Oh, well, whatever. Maybe they fix cars or whatever, To them, it doesn't seem like a big deal. But if you're like anybody who grew up in the 80s, you're like, "Huh, that's not normal to have like a bunch of cars sitting around." So they make their way to the house. They're trying to see if anybody's in the house. Doesn't seem like anybody is there. And eventually, like, Kurt makes his way inside, and I guess at this point, the house appears to be open. Like, it's the door is open, but
it's unlocked.
Well, it's unlocked, but they have like a screen door, basically.
Yeah.
And the door itself is like, I think it was kind of, it wasn't open, but it was enough that if you knocked, it just kind of swung open.
Yeah.
So I guess if you're a city person, you're like, well, I guess that means, it's okay to kind of come in or whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing plenty of those screen type doors growing up, but there's always been something kind of creepy about those kinds of doors because the wiring or whatever that's kind of on there, you can't really see through it very well. No. So a lot of times you can only see like a silhouette of somebody, but you can never really see in, even though they could probably see out because you're in the light.
Yeah.
So Kurt makes his way into the house, which he probably shouldn't be doing. He's asking if anybody's there, and he walks in about, I don't know, like a hallway's length of the house. There's a metal door and a metal little opening, and out comes our hero, my hero, Leatherface. Leatherface comes out with a hammer and bonks Kurt on the head and just takes him out. And bonk. Yeah, and then just kind of slaps him twice because the roadkill is not dead.
Yeah, first one didn't kill it.
Yeah, first one, he's not an expert. He hits him a second time, takes him out, slams the metal door, and then the movie starts. Like, they could have put Texas Chainsaw Massacre right there, and that may have been very impactful and very, like, that would have freaked out Hollywood, because Hollywood would have been like, wait a minute, whoa. Are you putting the credits after, like, the first 20 minutes of the movie? And it's like, hell yes, brother. That's what we're doing. Because the movie really, like, I can't begin to, like, describe, like, how that scene even still now, like, kind of gives me a chill down, like, my spine of, like, man, if there was any way to go, I hope it's not that for me. Like, ever.
Getting bonked on the head.
Getting bonked on the head just by a dude, like a giant dude with a hammer, and then just kind of flailing that I'm not even dead, and then they have to, like, whack me a second and third time, and then, like, just kind of, I kind of got sucked into the house. Like, I've been eaten by the house. When he slams that metal door, it's just like, I don't know. It's
so final. It's just so, I mean,
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
There's no coming back, and
There's no coming back. Yeah, there's no coming.
Right.
Yeah, there's no escape of anything. That is like you are gone.
That's
you just
you were done for.
just gonna write that guy off.
But there's something
it
about
so fast too. I mean,
yes,
and just because the movie plays out so slow, it drags in the beginning.
Yeah, it does.
It's kind of slow, the interaction with the hitchhiker, the interaction at the gas station.
Plus, there's no like setup for it, right? Like, there's not the modern sensibility of like, the music is gonna kind of lead you to believe something.
Usually, music tends to kind of lead you in and bring you in.
Like,
and
kind of
this
jack
shit
up the tension.
happens so quick,
brutal, so fast.
Yeah,
so
it's
like
quick.
no warning.
Yeah. I mean,
Not
which is great.
kind of-
No music to kind of like prepare you. It's just he's in your face. He hits you with a sledgehammer, slams the door behind you, and that's it. You're dead.
Yeah. And then that the sound of the door, like just kind of the metal like being slammed shut, and then the only thing you do hear is this like low bass hum of like boom, and it really is like, brother, it is on, like, and you really like fucked up.
You fucked up.
But I mean, like, I could probably write like a 50-page like thesis on just that whole like sequence in itself, because like, I don't know, there's something like everything we just talked about, but like not even metaphorically, it's so literal of like, man, I did not see that coming. It's so fast. It slaps you in the face. It's like, yeah, exactly like what you just saw on the screen. Like there are not very many movies where that is that effective and that fast, because especially in modern day movies, like you were saying, Denise, like people want more and they want to see like this high execution of like, oh, I want to see the guts.
Like
and
the tension building, right? Is just different because it's, you're kind of trying to bait the watcher into like being more, I don't know, like feeling the intensity, like being more engaged. But here it's like the opposite almost. Like it kind of lulls you because, like Jaime was saying, it's just such a slow burn in the beginning.
Right.
And besides the weird hitchhiker, they're not really in any kind of peril.
Right.
There's not any indication that anything's going to happen until that exact moment.
Yeah. I mean, it's like if you look at the curve, it would just be like so far, and then like a straight, straight up. Mm-hmm. Like, and man, I was thinking about this today. I could only imagine being like a mid 20 something in New York on 54th Street watching this movie for the very first time. like I would be scared fucking out of my mind if I saw that.
They'd never leave the city. I think that
I think you're right.
This fucked them up to do anything out like country. Nah, not happening.
No,
never going to Texas.
Country.
I am going to stay. I'm going to stay in the concrete jungle, and I'm never leaving.
Right.
New York City.
Yeah. Turns out I like the rats like around and things like that. Like I feel the comfort of knowing that they're around because fucking dudes are out there with a chainsaw. And so the movie kind of kicks off at that point because at that point Pam, who's like kind of calling for Kurt and didn't really, I guess, I think it's realistic to say like she probably didn't hear what just happened other than like maybe a slam. And
she was around the house, right?
She was
outside.
She was outside on like the it
was like a swinging
chair. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Bench. Yeah. So she wasn't, that's right. She wasn't sitting because initially when they were having their conversation, she was sitting on the steps.
Oh
yeah, but then
she gets kind of fed up with Kurt.
Yeah, she gets mad
that's
at
right.
Kurt.
That's right. Yeah.
Because he tries to like prank her with like, oh, here's something
with
funny.
The tooth. Yeah, that's right.
And she's like, what the fuck? And just kind of storms off.
Yeah. So she's she's in the yard, like a good little ways into the yard, and on like a swinging bench, and so she's kind of calling for Kurt, and Kurt's not responding. So she's kind of like, well, I guess I'll go check to see what's going on inside the house, which also leads to one of the more iconic like horror shots that we've seen in a very long time, which I love. And it's kind of funny because the guy who was the cinematographer for this movie, at the time, and even today, he's still like a working cinematographer. Daniel Pearl. He does a lot of music videos, and he was very like, again, like this movie was such a independent movie as independent movies get, because everything was done like, hey, I got a little bit of track, we can throw this down, we can do this, we can do that. Like the money people wanted to know how the money was going to get spent, and the cinematographer Daniel Pearl was very much like, look, just give me a little bit of time. I can do this. I can, we can set up these shots. We can move fast. He's like, I can give you this really cool shot if we can do this, we can do that. And so like a lot of times, even though it seems like kind of insane to do, but the day of shooting, he would kind of make a determination of like, all right, this is what we're going to do. Instead of like coming into the day with like a plan.
Yeah.
Because that's how you end up wasting a lot of money. Right. But in that particular scene where they set down some track and kind of do this really quick, when the camera kind of goes underneath the swinging bench, and Pam is sitting there and she kind of stands up and then starts walking towards the house, and the camera like follows her underneath like the swinging bench, but then the house kind of like just grows in size because he's using like this really wide lens that, like, it literally, if you really watch that scene, like the house just grows and looks like it is about to like swallow her as like she's walking towards it, because she's just kind of getting a little bit smaller and the house is getting bigger. And like just the way that shot is set up, like, when people talk about like horror being just trash cinema and this and that, like this movie has some of the best like cinematography and some of the most, because I feel like you have to have that in order to make a movie like feel creepy, is like you have to put a lot of thought and effort into like the setup of these things. And like some of these little shots here and there, like they mean so much to this film that it's almost like kind of hard to explain without obviously seeing the film, yourself.
Yeah.
It's also, I feel like, has a really, at least that shot in particular feels like very modern almost.
Yeah.
Because you don't see a lot of those, like that look in film of that era.
Right. Exactly. I think like you're right in you saying like, if people want to like stereotype this movie to say like, oh, it's probably not even filmed well.
Yeah.
They probably
trash.
have no idea that like,
yeah.
There are a tremendous amount of shots in here that are setting up the viewer to have your expectations just kind of like thrown all over the place, like left and right, and just being tossed around because it's, I mean, really, it's like a magic trick, right? Of like sleight of hand. It's like, we're going to do this and we're going to set you up for this. And then, oh, he's going to come in from this way. And like all that has to be really thought out and really well done. And this movie executes that on a level that like
it almost
has been matched.
Like
in
it
a
almost
lot of ways.
like, it's almost like too good for
Yeah.
what it's doing.
It was
Yes.
ahead of its time. Some of
Right.
the, some of
Oh,
the,
super. Yeah.
some of the
yeah.
cinematography was ahead of its time. I mean, I think,
Yeah.
I think I've read that. I mean, they study this movie,
Yeah.
like in schools, in classes, as far as like the way it was filmed and stuff.
Well,
Right.
it's always like the classic, like, oh, I'm a film student, but I don't have any money to make anything. It's like, well, who didn't have any money, and it's now in the history books of like film cinema is these
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think because they went in with a vision, they went in with like,
It was like $2,000 to like probably like make
it was
this
definitely
movie.
not, it was not a lot of money at all. This thing was shot on 16 millimeter. And like, I think at this point of the movie, when basically like everything is now just going to fall apart, for like the people that we're following, the cinematography gets better and better throughout the rest of the movie, because it kind of has to, because you're getting this, the story is now through like the eyes of just like this documentary, like, oh my God, I hope that this turns out for the best. Which it won't, but, so Pam makes her way into the house. She stumbles into one of the rooms, the room with like bones and chickens and feathers and
Poor
just
chicken in a cage.
yeah, it's just it's just a chicken
mess
hanging out.
everywhere. Yeah.
There's just furniture made of bones. There's like an armchair.
What almost what almost always like strikes me about that scene is like how bad it must have smelled in there.
Oh my God. Yeah. Just
like in the Texas heat.
In August.
Chicken shit all over the place.
Yeah. Just dried
husks of people.
Yeah. Dried out like carcasses of like deer and pigs and just
people.
Everything we go hunting for in that part of Texas.
Right.
That's,
like inside the house.
Yeah, and when she walks in there, the music is just very like, it's just like a bunch of like gongs and cymbal crashes and like pots being like slammed. Like it's very like experimental, like hippie music.
Yeah,
and it's like
chaotic,
but chaotic.
Very chaotic.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Like it would drive you to insanity.
Well, I think that's what they're going for,
Yeah,
right? It's like she's slowly like just being there is like gonna make you lose your mind.
Right. She's in the early stages of going into shock.
The shock, yeah.
Like, but she hasn't gone into shock yet. It's almost like it's all like slowly starting to dawn on her.
Yeah.
But she doesn't even realize that like Kurt is dead.
Right.
Like she's just freaking out by what she's seen. And so when Leatherface comes out and sees her in the hallway, and man, you get a real sense of how big like Gunnar Hansen was. He is like I don't know, Shaquille O'Neal to like Betty White. I don't know, like something like that. Like
so
he is just like towers
He's like
over
a monster.
her.
He really is.
He
like
really
a
does
monster.
look like a monster. Yeah. So he kind of like runs and grabs Pam as she tries to escape, and just like picks her up like a little
like
tiny
nothing.
puppy.
Yeah.
And just brings her in.
Just grabs her by the waist and like yoink.
Yeah, and I think also is another infamous scene is the hook, because like she's brought into the kitchen and thrown up on a meat hook, and everybody always cites that as like, oh man,
the worst.
That meat hook scene is just brutal,
so traumatic.
And the reality is you never see that. Like you never see her go into the meat hook.
Yeah.
And actually, as a matter of fact, even Tobe Hooper's technique, and I think this was like Daniel Pearl as well too, they purposely would cut out additional frames so when you're transitioning from one scene to another scene, usually take it up to a certain point, and I don't know, it's hard to describe like how in editing they want this continuity for like the viewer to understand like what they're seeing with their eyes.
Right.
They purposely like actually cut it up a little bit so it was more like jarring when the edit would happen there. So you'd almost say like a jump cut, but it's not really a jump cut. It really it's almost like
it out.
Yeah, it's almost like messing with your brain, because you're cutting out just enough that you do fill in the blanks. And so much so that like everybody was like, oh man, the fucking meat hook and all this and that. It's like you never see the meat hook go in. You see her react to it, but that's it. Like, and not to say that it's like totally okay and that like it shouldn't be traumatizing, but like that technique and that thought of how that was done was, man, so effective. And then so while Pam's hanging there, and I think the parts about that too is like that whole
just
scene.
Hanging out.
Yeah. Hey, I see what you did there. So while Pam's just hanging out, like the fact that there's like a pan underneath her to like catch all the blood, like the texture of all those things, and knowing that like, well, that's what you do with deer, and
you gotta
that's what
bleed
you
them
do
out.
with
Yeah,
pigs.
that's that. Yeah,
you gotta bleed them out.
Bleed them out. Yeah, I mean,
and again,
very hunter type.
Yes, very like that's just what you do
techniques, out. Yeah, cleaning on when you hunt. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're a New York college kid, you're like, what the fuck? Like, is that for catching blood? It's like, absolutely. But
you need that.
For me, that's not weird. I just don't want to get my floors dirty. You know, like
you never broke down deer with a chainsaw. Though,
these
right?
are
no,
because it wasn't available probably. But yeah, like I could see how those things were very jarring to people. And rural people, they're like, well, where do you think cows and your burgers come from? Like to them, it's not as big of a deal. That all said, while Pam's hanging out, Kurt is being cut up into this evening's meal because he's brought out onto the table.
Oh, that's right.
And then he's being, I guess, I don't know what you would call that.
Butchered.
Butchered, yeah, for the evening.
Yeah.
So we get we cut back to now Pam and Jerry and Franklin, and they're starting to kind of freak out because they're like, hey, it's starting to get a little dark, and Kurt and Pam have not made it back. So
it's that King Ranch dark.
Yeah, you're starting to get that. Well, it's funny because I think our sunsets in Texas, especially sometimes in the summer, are very pretty. And it is a little bit in this movie, especially in the 4K restoration. You get that golden hour sort of golden sunset, which looks really pretty. But when your friends haven't come back and there's no way of getting a hold of them and it's just brush out there, everyone's starting to panic a little bit. So Jerry decides that he's like, well, I'm going to go find them. I'll be back. You guys stay here. I'll be back before you know.
Kurt, right? Is it Kurt or
no? Jerry.
That was Jerry.
Jerry's Jerry's the one with the glasses.
He was the one driving the van.
Got it.
Yeah. So Jerry goes off to go look for Pam and Kurt. And Sally stays behind with Franklin. And so we get Kurt making his way, finds his way to the house. He also kind of stumbles across some of the same stuff. He doesn't realize that that they are there until he sees that some of the I guess like the one of the sweaters or something that somebody was wearing is there on the
porch.
Yeah, it's on the porch, and so he kind of was like, "Oh, okay, well maybe they're here," and it's kind of funny because then like Kurt is kind of like, "Okay, you guys are not Kurt." Jerry is kind of like, "Oh, you guys are just pranking me. You guys are just messing with me."
Yeah,
and I kind of remember that kind of was like a thing that people would do even back then, right? If you kind of mess around with people, and it's like, "Oh, this old abandoned house, I'm going to go kind of mess around in there." Even though maybe there is somebody in there or is not somebody in there. It just kind of seemed like something a young person sort of kind of thing would do, And so I guess Jerry's kind of like, okay, guys, stop messing around, stop pranking. But then he kind of like wanders into the house, and it's kind of funny because I don't want to say he doesn't really isn't freaked out, but he doesn't really seem to be too bothered or what he's kind of seeing. He's like, oh, I don't know, it's just a house. And so as he's kind of walking through, it's not as big of a deal to him. He makes his way into the kitchen, which is kind of like the slaughter room. And by that point he's like, this is kind of interesting. And lo and behold, Leatherface just again, actually he's looking around and I guess he hears the
freezer starts
to kind of move or shake around or something. And so he opens the freezer and it turns out that Pam is being frozen for later, maybe for Thanksgiving, frozen. Something for later in the month or later in the year
for peak freshness.
Yeah, you want to kind of get that frozen sort of feel in there, but so that kind of freaks Jerry out, and then Leatherface comes running in. Leatherface comes running in with his hammer again and just bonks Jerry on the head, and another free meal, I guess.
Doesn't he get away though?
No.
Jerry does?
No, he bonks him right in the head and he dies right there in the kitchen.
I thought doesn't he run?
Nope.
Isn't that why Leatherface gets all sad?
Nope.
That one scene?
Nope. He bonks him on the head and he kills him.
Okay. Why was Leatherface all upset in that one?
Well, so this is actually something that I think, that I think a lot of people, if you've never watched this movie, I think a lot of people just well, he's a monster and he's whatever. So he kills Jerry. Jerry's dead in the kitchen. Oh. And now Leatherface runs back out to the dining room because he's looking out the window as if Jesus Christ, is anybody else coming? Because what the hell's going on? My brothers are going to be really upset because people have just, people are just coming in and I don't know what to do. So I just went ahead and killed them. And so when Gunnar Hansen was talking about playing the role of Leatherface, he talked about how and I guess most actors, right? You develop a character for the character that you are going to play. And he sort of made the determination that Leatherface was a mentally disabled sort of person. Mm-hmm. that they were basically a child in a man's body, and didn't learn how to read or write, didn't really learn how to speak very well. So he emotes a lot through like animal sounds and just kind of like however he can like express himself. So that's what he does a lot of the time in the movie. And so when you see him run to like the dining room and he's kind of got his hands like on his forehead and he's kind of like upset, and I don't know if he's crying, but he's kind of like has an anxiety attack, basically.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't really know what the hell's going on.
Yeah,
like
people are coming in the house
they're just walking in the house. Like it's nothing.
It's almost like he's like a kid. Like, I mean, I'm a bit extreme, but kind of like Home Alone. That kid was defending the house.
Yes.
and I mean, yeah, as I say,
it's got to be a first that I've ever heard.
You know what?
I've
never thought about that, but you are 100% right.
I mean, because people are coming in the house. I mean, he was left alone because one brother ran off hitchhiking, the other one's running the gas station or whatever.
Right.
And he's basically he's the youngest of the three, and he's been charged to protect the house. And it comes up later, but apparently Grandpa's up there. So he's protecting the house. I mean, if you think about it.
Wait, I've never heard this take before. This is crazy.
It all makes
sense. And you heard it here on Halloween.
Right. Yeah. If you really think about it, like it's that I never really thought about that either.
It's a home invasion story, but from the point of view of the other side.
It absolutely is.
That's so crazy.
Because I mean, so that was Gunnar Hansen's take on the character, that he was, just an unintelligent, sort of person. He probably, if he did work at the slaughterhouse, I'm sure it was one of those like probably just picking up the guts,
just moving stuff around.
Like manual labor, right? Like, hey, just go move this to there, and you don't really have to say anything, right? And you just got to kind of nod yes or whatever. And so, I think for sure, like. He is the Macaulay Culkin of.
It was his day off, and he has to deal with this shit now.
Yeah, I imagine the anxiety attack he was having was because now the house was a mess.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah,
and they're going to come home and be mad at him because the house is a mess now.
Right.
He's like, if it was just one, it would have been fine.
Right.
But now there's three.
Right. Well, but then they would have been like, well, you were supposed to be watching after Grandpa. Like, what if these kids had gone messing around with Grandpa? Like, you know what I mean? Like, as like somebody who's not mentally all there, like unfortunately they maybe treated him like a dog or an animal, right? Of like bad Leatherface, like, and they just kind of slap him on the head or whatever. And so like, it, as weird as it sounds, that one scene where he is like in the dining room and he's kind of like sitting there and he's like freaking out. Like, I think that scene does so much because you really feel like empathetic to a slight degree. Well, if you watch the movie as many times as I have, you start to feel a little empathetic, but obviously like, I think if you're just kind of seeing it on face value, you don't really see that because you only see a guy who's
vicious murders.
Yeah, you see the guy who has human flesh on his face.
It's hard to look past.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to look past some of those slight little like details. But yeah, I really like that about the character. Like, it says a lot about the character. And so at that point now, we cut back to Sally and Franklin, and it is now dark, and
like pitch dark.
It is pitch dark, and it is King Ranch dark. And they have the lights on to the van, and it really is like, man, I can't begin to tell you, like, that scene from that point forward really does kind of scare me, because there were plenty of times where like Jaime and I were saying, like, we would go hunting with our dad. He'd like to take us, and we had a truck. And we had like a little camper bed on the back of it or whatever.
Which one of you dressed up as Leatherface?
No one, but it always felt, I always felt like we were being watched whenever we were out there.
I hate that.
I mean, it wasn't a camp with like a fire. I mean, we would have a place to sleep if it was either the truck or like sometimes there'd be like an old shack out there that all the hunters would kind of fix up, and we would do that. But there's something about being out in the dark where there's no, there's the only light is like moonlight. And then if we had a fire going, or if there was a little bit of electricity or a generator or whatever, at some point, all that light
that radius is
of light is small. Yeah. And so like out in the dark, and then with all the brush, you can't see past this, like the level, the layer of, so like if you have to go pee, we'd go just to the edge of the dark. We go just to the edge of the light. Oh my God. We would pee out there because, you can't pee or do any of that in where you're sleeping because, or like to throw food away, right? If we would eat dinner, if it was like rabbit or whatever for the day, you had to throw all that shit away from the camp because you don't want the animals to be coming into your area. Oh. So you'd have to go into the dark and toss that shit or to go pee or whatever because you don't, and I mean,
it was scary.
It was scary.
Like it really was.
Absolutely not.
And so like
that sounds horrible.
Seeing this scene where Sally and Franklin are like just in front of two lights of the van, like it always kind of gave me the creeps, and it still does to kind of this day because that's something I always worry about. Like, I mean, thankfully we live in the city and we don't have to worry too much about like
never going camping. That's for sure.
Well, we don't ever have to worry too much about getting so far away from the city that if we broke down, that I wouldn't feel like, oh, you know what, we're still close enough to a gas station or
civilization,
somewhere.
Or there's enough traffic. Yeah. There's enough traffic on that highway that you could whatever.
I think people really do not understand like where Franklin and Sally are relative to city dwelling in 1974. Like they are way the fuck away from like anything.
Yeah.
And so like
no one will hear you scream where they were.
Yes, absolutely. Like it's just not. It's not a thing. And so they are now like starting to freak out. So they're calling for Jerry. Sally is trying to convince Franklin that she's going to go look for Jerry and that just stay here, Franklin, because Franklin's in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And Franklin's like, no, we should go back to the gas station. You and me, let's go to the gas station. Let's go get some help. And then we come back. And Sally's like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, we need to get them back. And then Sally's like, well, then I'll go. And then Franklin's like, no, what if you go and they come back? Which, without cell phones and shit like that, like that's a legit problem. And so he's not wrong, as annoying as Franklin is.
It's the worst.
He's not wrong about what he's kind of saying. He's like, we really should stay here because the worst thing we could do is leave and then they come and then we're doing the old switcheroo where you know, we're gone, they're here and back and forth. And so this scene is like maybe one of the most like annoying scenes of the entire movie where Sally is just yelling for Jerry and then Franklin's yelling for Jerry and it's just them screaming into the black void. And then Sally gets really upset and says like, you know what? I'm just going to go. Like, give me the flashlight. I'm going to go. And Franklin refuses and says, no, I'm going with you. And the only way that you're going to get this flashlight is if I go with you.
It's like classic sibling bullshit.
Yeah, it really is. Yep. And so she finally gives in and says like, okay, fine. Like, I will take you. But she says like in a very upset, almost crying way that like, I can't push you through like the brush.
Yeah.
There's no trail. Like it's a wheelchair through like the worst terrain that you could think of. And Franklin's not a thin little boy. Like Franklin's a big dude. And Sally is not.
It's not like an automatic wheelchair or anything.
And Sally is not like a big muscular woman. She's small. She's a little petite woman. So she's trying to push Franklin. So they decide, okay, fine. Let's go look for Jerry. They go together. They're walking through like the absolute darkness. They kind of see a light off in the distance. So they start making their way towards that. Franklin says he thinks he hears something. And he does hear something. It's a chainsaw going like right through his goddamn chest. When Leatherface just pops out onto the screen and just murders him. And I will say
stealth chainsaw that he has.
When we watch this, I specifically looked over to watch Jaime when we watched this, and that scared the shit out of you. Like, I know it did. Like,
it did. Yeah, that's why I was saying when I was like, I'm pretty sure that I had not seen this because that jump scare was 100% effective.
Yeah. Dude, that's like one of my favorite jump scares.
I loved every second of it. Once the heart rate slowed down, I'm like, oh man, that was awesome. Yeah. That was so good.
That really was like the classic roller coaster. Like you kind of hit that peak. Like you just keep hearing the
yep.
Because you know something's coming.
Yeah.
But you just don't know when the drop's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then it's like you think it's going to, oh, there it is. It already happened.
Yeah. You hear that last little chain click and then you go down.
Yeah. Because, man, he pops out, that chainsaw goes in. Like, that scene is brutal. Like, it's kind of funny because they always say that there's no blood in this movie. That's the only time you see blood. And only then you barely see it.
Yeah, you barely.
Yeah. Because it's being sprayed onto Leatherface.
Yeah.
But it's so dark, you almost can't even see it.
Yeah.
And Sally is there watching her brother get just mutilated in a chair and just freaking out. And I don't know. I there's something about Marilyn Burns's performance of like, and I guess we can probably get a little bit into like, there is a little trivia of like the conditions on shooting this movie were just horrible. It sounds like.
Well, they did shoot it in Texas in the summer.
Right. And very low cost. Everybody they had stunt people, but they mostly did their own stunts.
They really were running through the like thorny, spiky brush.
Cocklebur, like trees.
Like she was like eaten up by mosquitoes, and it sounded like from how she was saying it, which we've sat in on a Q&A on, what was it? One of their anniversary
So
things.
we were really lucky, although I feel very old now. We got to sit in on the 30th anniversary screening 20 years ago.
Fuck.
Where we got to watch.
Wait, what? Is that right? Is that math right?
Yeah, that math is right.
It is.
That's when we saw it.
Oh,
we got to watch Marilyn Burns, Toby Hooper, like basically the entire cast, and Gunnar Hansen.
Gunnar Hansen was around.
They showed the movie, and then they did a Q&A with him afterwards. And it was almost like a therapy session of Toby Hooper kind of saying like, I'm so sorry I put you guys through that. Because he was like, that was a brutal.
Sucked.
That was like one of the worst experiences of my life. He's like, I'm so proud of what we did because it meant so much to so many people. But I know for a fact that sucked for you guys.
Yeah.
And
Marilyn Burns immediately was like, yeah, no, that was the worst.
She was like, that's the worst thing I've ever gone through, because she's like, those screams were starting to become very real.
Yeah.
That running at night, like when she gets bonked in the head, when she would fall over, like all that's, there's
not a lot of,
there weren't any pads on the ground for falling, like all that. I mean, and we were kids in that same, growing up in that same terrain, and like Texas clay, like Texas ground in the summer. I mean, it's concrete.
Yeah.
It has no give. Like it doesn't, it's not soft. There's not even really dirt. It's just like hard, like
rock.
Yeah.
Rock with some dirt on top.
When she's screaming and doing all those things at the end, like you really do believe, like all of those screams.
Yeah, it seemed miserable.
So she's now running from Leatherface, and again, you get a real sense of like how big Gunnar Hansen was.
He just towers over her.
And he was really fast too.
He was.
They actually
like
had
sprinting at him.
They actually had to tell him that he needed to slow down because he was too fast. And he was catching up to Marilyn Burns like all the time. And she was sprinting as fast as she could. And he that was a real chainsaw without the they took the chains out of the chainsaw.
Right.
Because that's the dangerous part.
Yeah, because that's the dangerous part. But that thing was screaming and howling with the motor and everything. And so she runs to the house you see off in the distance. She runs in, shuts the door behind her.
Surely she's safe.
Yeah,
now.
She's absolutely safe. So she runs upstairs because she's unaware of this house. So she assumes that
it's a normal house.
It's a normal, safe house. She runs in, she runs upstairs. She runs into a man in a chair who we come to find out is Grandpa. And Grandpa is an old, decaying corpse that's like somehow still alive, sitting up there, but Grandma's dead. Grandma's been gone for what appears to be a while.
Yeah.
So she realizes this is not a good house to be in. So she runs back from upstairs to downstairs.
I made a huge mistake.
Yes. Leatherface now has
caught up.
He's caught up and made his way through the door because he chainsawed his way through the door because she shut the door behind her. And he has made his way through the door and sees her. And he almost makes again that like, oh no, you're in the house.
Why are you in here?
Why are you in the house?
You too.
and if you look at him in that one scene, he kind of does make this like
Double
he
take.
shakes his head and like it's almost like this like Looney Tunes kind of like
What?
yeah like how did you get in the house? And like he runs upstairs and she panics and jumps out the window like in the most like what everybody would do kind of move. Like there's a guy with a chainsaw running up the stairs. I'm just going to fly out the window.
It's like, fuck this house.
So she flies out the window, falls out the back, and then
she's all cut up and limping. And
I mean, she's just jumped out of a 2-story house.
Yeah, she's not doing good.
Yeah. And so Leatherface makes his way back around the house, is now chasing her back through the
woods?
What in Texas we would consider the woods, which is not the woods, but
brush that would stab you several times.
Man, I can't tell you how many times like Jaime and I have probably we wouldn't purposely run through that, but there were times that when we go hunting with our dad, if we had to clear out an area or something that my dad needed cleared out, or like we're trying to get to an area, you have to kind of power through some of that stuff so that you can like come back around and like dig it out, you know, so that you can like, you got to kind of get on the other end of it a lot of times in order to clear your path. Man, that stuff, like my dad always required that we would wear like army jackets. And,
he'd have extra army, long sleeve stuff so that we could, because we were going to get cut up if we, walking through that.
Stuff, that stuff will cut you up like super easy.
How would you clear it out? Would
machetes, shovels, machetes. Like
wait, I was half joking about the machetes, but you had machetes.
No, we use a machete.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, like a very sharp machete will get you through like a lot of the the top part of it, and then you use kind of like a shovel to just kind of shovel it out of the ground. But
a lot we have to talk about after this podcast.
I don't know what to tell you. Like we were born and bred in Texas. Like this is just normal stuff for like Southern kids down on the border. Like my dad liked hunting. I mean, and we ate the food. It's not like we did it only because of sport. Like we ate everything that we hunted, and we tried to treat it with the right amount of respect. It's not like, oh, look, we're gonna like do weird stuff.
Yeah, we didn't have like the antlers on our head and shit. I mean, it was all it was hunt for food. I mean, I mean, we go to HEB and shit, obviously, but there was just something about being out there. He'd go out with our dad and be out, because we would take food with us in case we didn't find anything,
actually get anything.
But the goal was always, find rabbits or whatever, and if we got that or quail or whatever, we would clean it, and that's what we would have for dinner. But in the event we didn't find shit, there was there was potato and eggs and hot dogs in the cooler. But that was the backup stuff. It was if we didn't have to get into, we wouldn't.
Yeah. Which clearly was not a problem for like the Sawyer family and Leatherface. They were very good at like being able to catch their meal to the point where it's like, you know what? People will do just fine.
Yeah. I don't think they were eating rabbits though.
Yeah. So Leatherface is now chasing Sally back through like the fun brush. And she eventually makes her way back to the gas station. And I think, again, if I was watching this in 1974, I'd be like, oh my God, thank God. Like she's made it there. Even though you kind of wonder, it's like, why didn't the guy at the chainsaw just keep running after her?
Yeah.
But you don't really think about that within the moment, right?
Yeah.
You kind of are like, oh, thank God she's safe. She's made it. She's safe. Because this older man who doesn't look too off kilter, he's probably the most like normal person that we've seen outside of maybe the cemetery people that were hanging out in the very beginning.
Back in civilization.
It's a low bar.
Yeah, it is a very low bar. So she makes her way back there and starts telling him like, oh man, like you got to help me. He's killed everybody. He's coming. And you're kind of freaking out, and she's she's just like already going into shock if she's not already in shock. And the gas station attendant is like, I don't see anybody. I know what you're talking about. There's nobody out there. They're already gone. If they are, everything's fine. And so like,
I'll go get the truck.
Yeah, I'll go get the truck. And because there's no phone there, which again is not surprising that there is no phone out there.
In rural, whatever.
Yeah, if they're not running that line, then there's going to be no phone. And so he goes to get the truck, but something just kind of seems off. And as Sally's like looking around the place, and she's looking at the barbecue and really starting to stare at like what's kind of going on. I don't know if she picks up on the fact that like that doesn't look like beef, like that's being like slow roasted overnight. But it's something. It just didn't look like actual like barbecue that maybe we're all familiar with.
Yeah.
And then the gas station attendant comes back in with a potato sack and a rope. And then you quickly realize like, oh no.
Oh no.
And that's another scene where I can only imagine like there's just no like if you're drowning and you take in some water and then you're like oh god, you can feel that burn going down your throat, and then you think you've like made it up for air and another wave hits you and that's kind of the gas station attendant guy. Like you're just like oh my god, are you kidding? This guy also. And he's, even though he does it in a very nice, polite way of like, everything's gonna be okay. I just got to take you back.
I'm just gonna tie you up a little bit.
I'm just gonna tie you up, and I'm just gonna take you back, and everything's gonna be fine. And she grabs a knife that's there, but it turns out that Broom is like +2 to like I don't know, like +2 to like reach or something, because he's able to slap that knife like right out of her hand.
He just like bonks her over and over.
He's a master of that fucking broom, because then he like basically beats her down with the broom, and pushes her all the way down to the point where like she pretty much gets knocked out by the broom, and she gets tied up. She gets the sack on her, and she's in the truck, and they're about to head back to the house. Which, of course, at that point you realize, like, oh, they're going back to the house. Where all this has kind of been going on, because this guy's probably part of that group as well, too. I do love the fact that he is just still a businessman, where he's like, he runs out, and then he runs out into the truck, and then he's like, oh, you got to run back and turn off the lights. And then he runs back.
Yeah.
He's like, got to turn off the lights. Can't leave them on. Energy bill, run a man out of business in a like an economy like this or whatever, that bizarre comedy that Tobe Hooper was just like trying to make a point, of like, people
that
like
this
in
was
the
so
rural,
normal.
Got to make a living.
Yeah. It's just, that's just how it is. Or it also kind of reminded me of like when Dad would be like, can you guys close the door? Are we trying to like air condition the whole goddamn neighborhood?
Yeah.
Like this shit ain't cheap. Like, we got to save where we can save, set that thing to 78 degrees. And so when he's like, when he's turning off all the lights, and everything, I'm like, oh man, that's such like a Texas thing. It is a dad Texas thing to be like, we got to save the energy.
Yeah.
So they're driving back to the house. Another one of my favorite scenes, as he's driving up the driveway in I think it's like a Chevrolet like truck. Our grandpa, like actually not grandpa, not grandpa from the movie.
You cannot lead a personal story after talking about.
Well, I am though.
The Sawyers.
Our grandpa had a truck like that. He had a truck almost exactly like that. It's like a blue, 2-door Chevy, like truck, like a. I think the only difference is maybe his had like a wider base maybe or something, but it looked almost exactly like that truck. And we all loved that truck. And so every time I see that, I think of our grandpa, because he drove that truck until he was like, pretty much until he was in the hospital. Like
he didn't make good barbecue too, did he?
I don't remember.
Maybe. I don't think so.
Okay. I don't think so.
Well.
But he was good with a knife. So as they're going back to the house, they run into the hitchhiker, the old
that's
man.
Right. That's right.
Runs into the hitchhiker, and that's when he starts telling him, he's like, I heard everything on the news. They almost caught you. Did they find out who you were? Because he was doing shit in the grave, taking pictures, messing around with bodies in the grave, making his hippie art or whatever with like his little statuettes at the beginning. And so he's kind of yelling at him, you know, and he's kind of mad at him. And you're seeing all this through like the view of like the lights from the truck. And that shot is like, again, like really, really, really well done. It's like
unnecessarily good.
Yeah. It's just like so well thought out. It's creepy because like all you can see is a silhouette.
Yeah.
You can't see the rest of like you can't see the rest of the night. You know, it's just so dark. And so he's like, well, get in the truck, you know, and they get in the truck and they kind of make their way up the driveway to the house.
Bickering the whole time.
Yeah. Just kind of arguing with him. And then he's like, get this girl out of the car. And so he realizes that there's like, oh, cool. Like we got another, somebody or hitchhiker or somebody that we've pulled off into the house. So, he pulls him into the house. They kind of come in and I love that whole sequence because, the brother comes in and he walks up to the door and the door is all chainsawed to hell. And the swing door, is all chainsawed up. And it's like one of my favorite things to say whenever I get like, I think whenever our animals, whether it's our dogs or our cats are doing stuff, but it's always when he walks up to the door and he's like, it's all been chainsawed up and he yells, he's like, look what your brother did to the door. Like, I don't know. I love that scene so much. Like, I don't know why. It's just so funny. And again,
that validates what I was telling you earlier, that Leatherface was charged with taking care of the house and protecting it. So when they come home, they're like, what the hell happened here?
Right, exactly.
He chainsawed the door. There's, he's totally,
Well, he talks about how he shouldn't have left his brother home alone while you were out messing in the graves. Like, he tells him that
he was supposed to be babysitting.
He was supposed to, be babysitting. And then, of course, things even get more bizarre because now Leatherface comes out of the kitchen dressed as a woman, because he's now wearing his woman outfit
face
because he's playing the part of mom now. So he's got like the fancy makeup and the fancy hair. He's got that Texas
the big hair,
Texas big hair, and he's wearing the dress and he's trying to prepare the meal for the evening. And
I'm so fucked.
It's so bizarre at this point. Like you're just like, man, what the hell is going on? And I love it because of that. Like I love the fact that it is so bizarre that you're really starting to wonder, like, the fuck am I watching? Like, what is this? And so at that point, you do pick up on the fact that like they sit down Sally and the hitchhiker takes the bag off of Sally and starts laughing because he's like, I thought you were like too busy to come to our house. And at that point, like, I'm pretty sure like all hell is just kind of broken loose. And I think Sally like passes out at that point.
She's definitely in some kind of deep
I think
shock.
she just kind of goes into shock and just kind of like passes out. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in the house like that I could go on and on about, but it basically just builds up to the fact that like basically they have prepared a meal and they're wanting to serve Sally a meal, which is probably at this point, I'm pretty sure it's Kurt. Because like they had been preparing stuff all day. And so I think that they had been preparing Kurt.
Leatherface has been slaving away in the kitchen this whole time.
And he is now dressed now in his tuxedo.
In his finery.
In his fine outfit. And the brothers start arguing. Sally screams. Marilyn Burns basically screams for the last like 15 minutes of the movie, like nonstop.
It's not dialogue anymore. She's just like freaking the fuck out.
She is just absolutely going nuts. And at that point, the music is just so experimental. The camera angles are just so weird.
Nuts.
Like it is
those
You feel like
close-ups
you're
of
going-
her eyes are crazy.
Yes.
So
You feel like
crazy.
you're going insane with her.
When when
Yeah.
the brothers are talking, you hear like the sounds of pigs like over their
oh
voice.
yeah, that's right.
Like it really is like a very good representation of going mad.
Yeah.
Like I mean maybe it I guess you could say maybe Clockwork Orange or a few other movies where like there is like representation of just going like insane. But
Yeah.
I think that this is like the bar for like what
The
insanity,
standard, yeah.
madness, you
Yeah.
know,
Oh yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. That
it's
whole
just,
table scene is just. Oh my god.
it's intense.
Nightmare.
It's
Yeah.
it's absolutely a nightmare. Like you're tied to this chair, you can't move. Everybody's laughing at you, and then they're
Yeah.
kind of screaming and howling, and
Trying to feed you your friends.
yeah, they're trying to make you eat your buddy, and like, so then they decide that Grandpa is going to go ahead and just put Sally out of her misery. Grandpa's not very good at.
He used to be good.
He used to be the best.
He's the best.
We are
He was
told.
the best.
Yeah, we were told he was the very best, but not so much anymore. So he's unable to kill Sally. Sally's able to get away. She once again just decides to like head dive out the window, which is probably the best move. That I think it's the most effective move if you really.
She got out of there.
Yeah, she got out of there really fast. And it is now morning, so she has been in that house like all night. So I mean, easily like 14, 15 hours,
Right.
like just straight through the night. It looks like early morning. I would guess it's probably like 5 or 6 a.m. Because you kind of see that morning dew, like the kind of like the haze in the morning. So you see that, and she just starts running back to the road, and here comes the hitchhiker, and here comes Leatherface, and like, man, that is just as scary as it is at night. Like it's almost scarier seeing it in the day.
Oh yeah.
Because it almost feels like, oh, you're safe.
Yeah, you should be safe in the daytime.
Absolutely. Like the sun
Sun rises.
fixes everything.
Yeah, the monsters should be
Right.
Should be like
Yeah.
shouldn't have power.
They're back in the dark.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
You know. Yeah.
Turns out not so much. Now they can see better.
Yeah.
So like
I can chase you.
everybody's chasing her down the road. And the hitchhiker has his razor blade or his straight razor, and is slashing up Sally on the back as they're running to the road. Leatherface is in not too far behind in hot pursuit
With the chainsaw.
with the chainsaw and tuxedo, or not tuxedo. He's in his suit. And I guess like through all this, and as they're in the middle of the road, Sally's getting carved up, and the hitchhiker doesn't see the giant truck that comes through
Semi-truck.
and just runs him over right in the middle of the road, out in the middle of a rural road. So although people would be like, how could you not see that, or how could that happen? I mean, it happens as roadkill all the time. Like, it's not surprising, you know.
Yeah.
Trucks are driving down those roads. They're not going
So
like,
fast.
They're not going 30 miles an hour.
Right.
They're going 70.
Now, especially in those back roads where
Yeah,
you
you're
know,
trying to make your time.
Yeah.
So that truck just comes hauling and runs over the hitchhiker. Like,
woohoo.
yeah, so one down. And then Leatherface comes running out and continues to chase Sally. Sally runs to the truck, who we run into. I guess he's just listed as the cattle truck driver, Ed Gein, who's driving that truck. But
Wait, what? What's the name?
Oh, Ed Gein, or Ed. I don't know how you pronounce his last name. Guinn.
Gwyn, maybe.
Gwyn. Yeah, because Ed Gein is actually.
An actual.
Yeah. I was like,
I'm like,
that's not
wait,
him.
was he in this movie?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. He was like he was giving all the all the how-tos on Leatherface. So yeah, the truck driver who's in the movie for all of like 4 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And is now sort of a celebrity with the movie. Throws like a I don't know, was it like a wrench or
Yeah,
something?
big wrench.
Oh,
And
that's
hits
right.
Leatherface like in the face, and Leatherface like chainsaws his leg.
Yeah, he falls
Yeah, and Sally makes her way to a truck that just happens to be passing through the road. Jumps in the back.
The trucker just keeps running.
Yeah,
into
he
Yeah,
ran
trucker-
the other way. Yeah.
That guy's
He's
already
like-
in San Antonio or somewhere.
He's, he's done with that job.
That guy is long gone. And then Sally jumps in the back of a truck, and the truck, of course, in classic like horror fashion, can't seem to start back up after it's kind of stalled out. It starts back up, and here comes Leatherface like a shark, just at the edge of the water, and just misses her. I mean, just barely. The truck drives away. Sally is screaming in like an insanity scream or insanity laugh. She's laughing.
She's laughing
because
she's definitely insane.
She's just fucking lost her marbles and can't believe what just happened. And Leatherface does the Leatherface dance with his chainsaw, which is like honestly one of the scariest things I've ever seen. Not only is that scary, but the fact that it just like again kind of cuts off a little short than you're expecting it to.
Yeah.
And it just fades to black, and you're like, I don't believe you that this is over. Like, the movie is over, but
that motherfucker's still out there.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. You mentally are like, this is not over, and I don't ever want to go anywhere where I can't like that, where there's not light or whatever. So, yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like, I love that ending because it's so effective to be like, this may or may not be over. And I think that's what makes it an awesome video store rental is like, if you're sitting there with your friends and that just kind of ends and it fades to black and you all kind of turn to each other and you're like, what the fuck did we just watch? Like, I can't believe that whole thing just happened, you know? And I felt that again. And I feel it like almost every time I watch that movie. I know when you and I watched it, Jaime, I don't know if you felt that way, but like when it's over, you kind of like take this breath of like, I can't like that's,
no, yeah, it's like the end of a roller coaster ride. It's like you're catching your breath when the cars come back to the stall or whatever, and you're just kind of like, oh, damn, you know. And it just it's definitely had that feel. Like it's all the way to the end, and it just stops so abruptly, and then you're just kind of like left, like you're finally able to breathe, you know. Yeah. It was so fucking good.
It's I watch it so often, as Denise pointed out, partly just because it's one of the few movies that I still get like those feelings every time I watch it, because there is just so much. It's so visceral that like even there are even times where I feel like when you're watching it, it's like I almost feel like you can smell the movie, like you can feel the heat, like you can just. There's so much about it, and I think especially if you grew up in Texas.
Exactly. We can, because we've been in that Texas heat and in the brush and in the, you know, I mean. We have that memory, I guess, of the smell and the feel of the heat that we can put it together with the movie and know what, and can imagine what it felt like there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know, I guess until the day that I'm no longer like on the earth, like I can't not think that this will be like a movie that, like, it's insane to think that I will consider this like my favorite movie of all time. I know Quentin Tarantino has said like he considers this movie to be a perfect movie because it does all the things that it should do very right. And it causes you as like an audience viewer to feel all these feels. But I mean, I wouldn't really disagree with a lot of that. Like this movie, it holds up. It has, like Denise was saying, there's a lot of stuff in there that was very ahead of its time for a lot of stuff. And I don't know. I think like there's been tons of remakes. There's been tons of reboots. There were sequels or all these other things. And none of them like come close to like touching like what this movie was able to do. And it seems like a very special, unique sort of thing because it went against Hollywood. It went against like the norm. It went against kind of the standards of whatever, like a conservative sort of viewpoint of like, well, that's not film because film should be a 3-act structure and it's a hero's journey. And like, you have to see the hero like this and that or whatever. And it's like, or you tell a story like this and you do that instead and just execute it really well. So
this changed movies.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, movies were not the same after this movie. It was like you could put it up there with when they put sound to movies. Like they used that, before, like when it was Charlie Chaplin or whatever, and then they went to, then there was sound. And then when they brought in color, and then this.
You're right.
You
In
know what I
a
mean?
lot of ways. Yeah, because like the idea of like that level of fear, like, I mean, that said, like, so like Nosferatu came out like
the 20s,
the
30s. Something like that.
1920s. Yeah, because it's over 100 years old. And it did freak out people, and it was a scary sort of thing, but like, I don't know, like this idea of
it being so, I think more than anything, it's like for being so visceral and so kind of in the face of the film industry and the censorship of the time, and it was very bold, and it's like it feels very much almost like like a student film, in that like we're just gonna do whatever, we're gonna do what we want, because fuck the big wigs and fuck the corporations, and who cares about Reagan or whoever. They were like, well, it was pre-Reagan probably.
Yeah, that would have been
Nixon. So yeah, fuck those guys and their suits and their ties, and we're gonna make this because it's awesome, and because we can, and nobody's doing it.
Well, but it was more real to them, and like it was more real to us. Like seeing like a vampire in Nosferatu is not as scary, because it's like somebody can tell me that vampires are not real, but
there's that separation, right? But when the movie right up front is telling you, oh, this was totally true, by the way, and then it's shot in the way that it's shot, it's like, wait, it doesn't feel that far off from being like a real thing that happened. And like people, like the actual actors in it were like genuinely as miserable as they actually were being shot on film. Then it's that kind of layer of like, oh, I don't, there's, that layer of like disbelief when you're watching a movie. It's like, wait, what's actually happening?
Yeah. You would never see something like this again until maybe the Blair Witch.
Yeah.
In that you couldn't internet check the fact that Texas Chainsaw actually happened.
Right.
Or, like he's still out there, or, this, or, I mean, you could so urban legend this thing that, I mean, how could anybody not feel afraid, to hear these stories and then to see this imagery? And, it really, like, I mean, it affected me in a way that, like, it's hard to describe, because, like, I mean, I think if like, you guys know me, and I feel like for other of my friends that kind of know me know that I'm not like, when it comes to an emotional scale, like I don't like even when we go to haunted house, like I don't jump, like when jump actors like jump out, like I barely move. And
you're evaluating their makeup and stuff.
Yeah, basically.
I mean, literally.
Yeah, literally.
You're just looking around taking notes of what everything looks like.
But I think because I know what is kind of happening, right? But like whenever there's real danger around me, like you kind of go into that fight or flight sort of feeling, and I have felt that before, but very rarely does that, like those that adrenaline is reserved, like in my body, to do those sorts of things. But when I see a movie like this, I really do feel like that kind of feeling, because like you were saying, Denise, it is very raw. It's very like, it touches a lot of points that are like, I don't know, it's hard to describe, but I think in a lot of ways, maybe that is why it is kind of a perfect movie in some senses, is because if a movie from an entertainment standpoint is really supposed to make you feel something, like this movie makes you feel like a ton of things, even if feeling uncomfortable is what
it's still a feeling
it's doing. Yeah. It's maybe one of the ultimate feelings is to have like an uncomfortableness. So yeah, I think it's almost to go without even being said that this is a top shelf video movie.
Oh, really? Surprise.
And this wouldn't even be
shocked.
This wouldn't be a top video or a top shelf video select. Yeah. This is up there.
It's been on there.
it's been on there, I think, from day one. And I think for Halloween, I think it's I mean, obviously it's not a Halloween movie, but when you talk about icons and things that when things go bump in the night, like if you think it's Leatherface, then I mean, it very well could be. Yeah. So, I don't know. I'm trying to, I can't remember when the first time I saw this, but I want to say It probably was either in junior high. It definitely was too young. But I want to say I even saw it younger than junior high because it would have been like at a friend's party or someone's sleepover or something where it's like,
sure,
we're all trying to dare each other to watch the scariest thing. And at that point, I had already seen Nightmare on Elm Street and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, I've already seen that. So
it's
like
for babies.
And then you watch this and you're like, fuck, like Jesus Christ, like, but yeah, I mean, I think it's like a perfect video rental. Like whenever you have the opportunity, to rent something like this, it always had the classic cover. But I think, that all said, I don't know. Do you have any last kind of closing thoughts? I guess now that like this last viewing that I know you saw is like you were saying is sort of the accumulation of like a lot of things that the parts and pieces that you've seen, and to actually sit down and watch it all the way through. Like, do you have any like sort of last thoughts or any insight?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. It was always destined to be top shelf video. I know since now that we've incorporated the top shelf select, I don't think it would go in there because those are kind of like the obscure kind of things, and this thing is just so important. This one is so important, and it's such a I guess a foundation of the genre. I mean, it's like everybody in some capacity knows what Texas Chainsaw Massacre is, either with the reboots or video games now. They use Leatherface is like a character you can unlock now, and like in Dead by Daylight or whatever.
Well, there's a Texas Chainsaw game.
That's right. Yeah. So there's a it's there. It's in pop culture. It's not so it was. It was destined to go on the top shelf. So that's the only place it could be.
Yeah. Well, and I think in terms of like inventory, like I think it's pretty clear, like pretty much every format. I think this should be on VHS for those who want to get that extra like level of
the griminess,
the authenticity of how like it was. I don't want to say how it was meant to be seen, but how it was seen by so many that, I mean, it was nightmare fuel. It almost feels like watching The Ring, and you'll die in 7 days if you watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre on VHS. Like it was that like intense.
Right.
There's Laserdisc, which I think we should have. Well, let me just say what I have. So I have it on VHS. I have it on Laserdisc. I have the Japanese Laserdisc. I have like two versions of it on Japanese Laserdisc. I have the Japanese VHS. I have the CEDs of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is like almost like a vinyl record version of it. It's a very unique player that I don't have one, but they were not around for too long. I have this on DVD and I have it on Blu-ray, and I have I have the 25th year anniversary edition, and then I have the I've got the 50 year anniversary edition behind me.
It's like single-handedly fueling this industry.
Yeah.
The Texas chainsaw industry.
Because it's important. It's an important part of Texas. Like I think whenever we replace the state, what is it? The
flag?
No. When we replace the bluebonnet, which is like the state flower, we'll just replace it with Leatherface.
What?
So yeah, I mean, we should have it in all those formats. I will say, and I think the 4K, because you and I watched the 4K version. The audio, that was something that we were talking about when we listened to it.
Yeah.
The audio is so good in the 4K version because you can hear the night.
You hear the crickets behind you.
You hear the crickets.
It's almost like we were talking about in the campfire. Like you hear all this ambient sound outside in the darkness. And the way he was playing it on the 4K, it was like the crickets were like in the dark. Like you could hear it out in the. It was it was. So,
and it had distance. Yeah, it had a lot of depth to it.
Yeah, there was depth in the sound.
I can't begin to explain like how scary that would be when we go hunting with our dad. Is like sometimes like the stillness and like the quiet, and then you can hear like everything sounds more like crickets and things like that's all of a sudden sound louder than maybe they are.
Amplified, yeah.
And I think that's because your senses are heightened.
Oh.
Because then if you hear like something move, that's when everyone's like, "Did you hear that?"
Ew.
Yeah.
Like,
And it could be, you hear the twig break, and then there's coyotes out there.
Yeah, there's
and
coyotes or deer.
there's something out in the dark looking at you.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Hard pass.
Yeah, it really was. Like it really was
terrible.
very frightening. And it was funny because my dad probably didn't feel any of that. But since we were we were consuming this, like all these
He's
videos.
Like, why
and all
are
these
you guys so huddled so close to the fire?
He was watching Andy Griffin and shit. We were sneaking in, movies like Silent Rage, Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw, Hellraiser. So all of the monsters were in the dark.
Yeah, the darkness was very defined for us. Like
oh fuck yeah.
And so to be around real darkness is like a real scary thing.
Yeah.
Like
the evil was out there.
Yeah, it definitely was.
We just couldn't see it.
Yeah. And I think just to kind of add on top of all that, and I know this is like our extra long Halloween episode, Denise and I were lucky enough for my birthday 2 years ago. 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It wasn't last year.
No.
It was.
What was it?
No, it wasn't last year.
Okay.
It was 2 years ago. There was a company or a group or a guy that
It's a guy. He owns a company that basically like holds all these special events that surround movies. Mm-hmm. So for example, like there's like a Christmas special. Well, where he'll sell tickets to watch. I think it's to watch the movie.
Oh, they watched Home Alone.
Home Alone in the church where Kevin
where he went to church. Yeah, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So they found the church and I think they screened the movie in there. Mm-hmm. And then similar, like he's done a couple other things like that. But the big one that year, I don't even remember how we found out about it. Probably like Facebook.
I know I found out through Fangoria.
Oh, okay.
But by the time I found out, like all the tickets were sold out, and I was like, okay, well that's the thing. And
we'll tell them what it was.
Well, and so so this particular guy had reserved, I guess the original house where the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was filmed, where the Sawyers lived, not the gas station, but the actual house. That was actually in Round Rock, Texas, and I guess sometime in the 90s, they literally moved the house.
Like piece by piece?
Yeah, I think they cut it into 3 parts, and they were able to move the whole thing to Kingsland, Texas.
Right. They like reassembled it.
They put it back together.
So it was one of those houses that like it sounded like you can buy off a catalog.
You bought it in a catalog.
Yeah, and then they just ship the pieces to you, and I guess you build it.
Yeah,
Which is so random because it's like a proper house. It's like it looks awesome.
It's a really nice house.
The original location where it was filmed, they moved it from there to Kingsland, and for a long time, the new people that owned it like didn't really acknowledge or care about the Texas Chainsaw legacy. Right. And then the fans
they converted it into a bed and breakfast.
It was a little cute little diner. And then the fans started coming out of the woodwork when they realized what it was. So after a while, they started putting like a little display of like
nothing too big.
Their main thing was like, oh, we're a bed and breakfast.
Right.
Sure, you have your cute little movie, but please move along.
Yeah.
It wasn't like they weren't really trying to advertise.
Yeah.
That you know, I don't think they were super stoked about the connection.
Right. And so it just so happened that I'm in a Texas Chainsaw Massacre like fan group. Surprise. And somebody on there had mentioned they were like, "Oh, I had 2 tickets to go to this event, but I can't go now. Would anybody be interested?" And I was a little skeptical at first because I was like, I don't know how I feel about buying anything from anybody that I don't know, but this is a pretty good group of people. We're all into the same thing. So I reached out to this person. I asked him, I was like, "So what's the story here?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's just, I was going to fly in from Florida to go to this event, but I can't. And so I'm looking to sell the tickets." And I was like, all right, well, if I can verify that the tickets are valid and they are real tickets and you're not trying to scam me, I was like, I will buy these tickets off you, because it just so happened that it was a Sunday night. right?
Yeah, it was a weird day.
It was a Sunday night. Like because they did a Saturday night event and they did a Sunday night event.
Oh, that's right.
And my birthday just happened to fall on a Sunday that they were going to do this event. And the event was they rented out the entire like cafe so that they would lock us all in and we would all sleep inside of the cafe and watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre together as a group and basically have access to the entire house where the movie actually happened.
Where the event
And so I validated the tickets. The tickets were legit. I messaged the guy and told him, I was like, all right, I'll buy these tickets. So we drove from Dallas to Kingsland and stayed the night. Now, granted, we because we came in so late to the event and everything, we didn't realize we were supposed to bring our own like sleeping bags and something to sleep on because we literally were going to just sleep on the floor of this place
in a restaurant.
Yeah. They like that pushed the chairs and everything to the side.
But the original spaces were still there. So like they didn't look like the way they did in the movie, but the space you could definitely tell it was the space. So like the dining room where they have Sally tied up and they're all like like they had that room was there and the kitchen is right next to it. The kitchen was an actual functioning kitchen, so it didn't look like the one in the movie because
but they knew like roughly where Pam would have been hanging.
They were like they kind of had it marked out. It was like Pam would have been here and the cooler would have been here. And
that's so awesome.
The room where Leatherface actually like kills Kurt right in the beginning, like that was actually like they fake walled that in for the movie. That wasn't actually there. And the little ramp, they put that in specifically for the movie. But the dining hall where Pam walks around and all the chicken bones and all that room was there. It's attached right next to where the dining room was. And then the stairs that you can see leading up that go to the upstairs.
To Grandpa.
Yeah, and then that little nook where Grandpa was sitting was still there. And they did have a grandpa like actually like sitting in a chair.
Like a figure.
like a figure sitting in that chair. And the window and everything was there where
she jumps out.
Where she would have jumped out. Yeah. The house was like surprisingly smallish.
Yeah, it was.
It's very tight, which says a lot again about like how well this movie is filmed because the house seems huge and bigger than it is. It is not that big.
No,
it is
tiny.
very tight.
Tiny.
And it was really nice. I mean, the other side of it, I think, was more renovated because they did say that when they filmed there, that the family that owned the house during that time, they actually were just in another room. Like they literally were in the house while the movie was being filmed. And the film, like they were using like real meat and real things. So like the house was like smelling and it was gross and it was hot. And this is before like central air was. That house is not built for central air at all, actually. I think now it does have like air conditioning, but it's like that old style where it comes out from underneath, like not from the top, which is not very effective because like the hot air
rises.
Yeah. So, but yeah, we got to stay there that night, and it turns out like Central Texas in that area of Kingsland is like gorgeous. It's like
it's real pretty.
Some of the prettiest like part of Texas I've ever seen.
Like the cute little like ponds and
lakes. They were like there was a big
greenery.
Old lake at night that we were able to walk around. Like it was the most romantic
serial killer
death house. Yeah. I mean it was unreal. And the best part about it too was like we were there because the guy that was running that tour at the time told us that the owners of a lot of that property there were going to be giving it up because they just, I guess somebody was ill.
They were going to retire or something.
Maybe they were going to retire or they're just kind of getting to that age where it's like they didn't want to have to maintain it anymore. So they were going to sell it. And the people that were going to like buy it definitely didn't seem to care much about the legacy of like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They were going to just tear it down or whatever. And so we thought that this was going to be like the last opportunity to see it, which is why this guy set this up. And so it was really important, I felt like, to be able to see it be one of my favorite movies. And thankfully, the people that did ended up buying it decided to kind of lean into the Texas Chainsaw aspect of it. And now it's actually called Hoopers, as in from Toby Hooper. Because before it was called like the Antler Inn or something, or like
I think that was the one next door that we ended up.
Oh, that's right. Because we ended up staying at the little, like, what appeared to be an extremely haunted, like
it was just as cool. It was actually awesome. It was this old timey inn. It looked like Victorian or something.
It's very Victorian.
It was so creepy, and it had like a clawfoot tub and like white tile in the bathroom.
Yeah,
it was creepy as fuck. It was awesome. It was cheap too.
Yeah. Oh, it was super nice. Like,
it was so nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely haunted.
Yeah, it felt very, 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 very haunted. But that whole area was just super cool. Yeah. And it was cool to be able to experience that. I don't think it was that same weekend, but then we also got to go see the gas station.
The gas station.
That's in the movie, which is in Bastrop.
That's in Bastrop, yeah.
Yeah. And so we got to get some barbecue from there. So that was fun. But yeah.
It's just a big gift shop.
It's just, yeah. I mean, there's so much, I feel like, because it's such an important movie and there's so many cool things about it, like in terms of us in our video store, because we already know what our inventory is going to be, like, I don't know, I can't begin to tell you, like, I think we would just have a whole area just Texas Chainsaw.
It's just like a whole section.
I mean, when it comes to like, what do we want for the store that would be there, like all of it, you know, like we should have chainsaws and masks and
barbecue
and we
I was going to say some Sawyer family beef jerky.
Yeah, we could do that. Well, if you watch the second one, you realize that if you watch the second one, you realize that they switched the chili.
Yeah, they transitioned to chili.
But yeah, jerky or barbecue would be very good. Like sausage for sure. Mm-hmm. Aprons would be a big thing.
Oh yeah.
Grilling stuff.
Oh man, I would love to have like a Texas Chainsaw like grill. You know, like in the shape of a chainsaw or. We actually named our most recent adoption to our family a dog. Yeah, a dog that we adopted, Sally, after Sally from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Nice. So we all sound like Franklin now whenever we're chasing her around the house because we're like, Sally? Like, it's just, I think we actually kind of, I made a mistake because now we just all sound like Franklin when we're just yelling around the house. But yeah, I mean, we would have a whole area dedicated to soundtrack and posters, and I have a flag in the garage, one of the come and take it, but it's with a chainsaw in the garage.
Oh, nice.
I don't know. This movie is like, I don't know. It's hard to describe. I guess the last little thing that I will add is I think when Denise and I were still dating.
I don't think we were even dating yet. We were just hanging out.
Watching
movies.
We were getting a feel for each other.
Yeah, we're like, I don't know, is he cool? I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
So he invites me over, like, hey, I have all these movies. Do you want to watch movies? And I'm like, sure.
I like movies.
Whatever, I like movies. I'm sure this is safe. And then he pops in Texas. Have you ever seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre? And I told him, like, I'd seen, I think at that point I'd seen the Jessica Biel one, the remake.
Oh yeah.
And it was funny because I'd seen that. It came out around the time I was in college.
Oh, that's right. It had only been a few years earlier.
Yeah. And I remember one of the girls, like, in I think it was my Spanish class, like freaking out, crying. Because she was like, I don't know. They said it's based off of a real story, and he's still out there. And she's like freaking out, crying, because she had just come to class after she had just seen the movie, and she was so upset. And I was sitting there in the back. I'm like, that movie sounds awesome. I'm gonna go watch that. That sounds great. So I had seen that version, and it was fun. It was fine. Like it was
very different movie.
Yeah,
altogether.
It was a good movie.
Yeah,
it was a good homage.
It's fun.
And then I met Eli, and then he was like, "Hey, you like movies? I like movies. How about we watch this one movie?" And I'm like, "See, that sounds super safe. That sounds great." I had just moved into a new apartment at that point. And we were hanging out, we were watching the movie, terrifying, obviously. And then as soon as it's over, he looks at me and is like, okay, well, bye. I'll see you at work. And I'm like, all right. Cool, I guess. Sweet. Drove back to my new apartment, hadn't even finished unboxing everything, and just kind of sat in the dark listening to the branches scratch at my window. So, and just did not get sleep for a week. So
that's hilarious.
Well, and then
how I met.
And now we're married. So there it is. That's all it takes.
That's how you get the girl.
That's how you romance the women. Yeah, it turns out I was not very good with.
Terrible. You're terrible at dates.
Yeah, but at least I was honest. So yeah, I mean, my favorite movie of all time, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I think one last thing, because we're doing the ultimate crossover here for Halloween, and we are like a top shelf video. We know this is a top shelf video, but because you're here, Denise, and we want to talk about a little bit of the food aspect of these things, it might seem a little obvious for this movie, but maybe not, because I think we all think of this a little different. But if we had to pair Texas Chainsaw Massacre with something that we are thinking about, I'd be very curious to what all three of us think we would have for this movie. And if you've listened to Film to Table, it's not always like what is in the movie. Sometimes it's what we think that
what
we
inspires
us. What inspires us, or what makes us feel a certain way about certain things as we're like watching movies like this. I will go first because I'm going to throw the curveball that you're probably not expecting. But because this movie feels like it's very, I hate to use the word comforting, because it's not necessarily a comforting
That's
movie.
alarming.
But like everything that I was describing earlier, of like the fact that it still makes me feel a certain way more than any other movie that I watch, no matter how many times I watch it. And it does remind me when I was younger as a kid. And it does remind me of when we would go on these trips with our dad hunting, or when we go visit relatives that would live outside of the city and sometimes in rural areas. There's something just like, there's a level of comfort that it makes me feel kind of comfortable, but at the same time kind of scared and sort of unsure. And the only thing that kind of like, I feel like would make me feel like comfortable eating while I'm watching this movie is hamburger helper, hamburger helper, because we grew up on that, and it's probably the worst thing you could eat. But there is something about comforting knowing that
800% sodium.
Yes, but there is something comforting to knowing that my mom made it and that my mom's given it to me, and she's like, if you have this, everything's gonna be okay. Because like this movie did scare the shit out of me, but if I had my hamburger helper, hamburger helper, I feel a little bit safer. Even though like it would be so hot when we'd get it that I would put it in the freezer for just like 2 seconds to let it cool down instead of trying to blow on it.
You're breaking my heart in so many ways.
So this is little version of me though,
okay,
like little kid version, but it still carries over into the adult if we're just being completely honest.
Yeah, I was like don't act like you wouldn't eat that shit. Like
I would absolutely eat that now. And there's probably a good chance that I've eaten hamburger helper when you were out working and I wasn't able to make anything for myself. Man.
Did I ever tell you, Jaime, there was one time I made this incredible sauce. It took all day just simmering away in a pot. I think it was like a new recipe for like bolognese or something. All day long, simmering in a pot, hand chopped everything, premium meat from somewhere. I finally like put it all together with some pasta, set in front of Eli. He starts eating it. Oh man, this is so good. It tastes just like hamburger helper. And I'm like, cool, I'm going to jump off a bridge now.
I hear, I see, I can hear the pain that caused, but you got to know that came 100%. That is the highest compliment
it really was.
Any of the Luna boys can give you.
It was super sincere.
Oh yeah,
and it was super like he looked super satisfied, and I just sat there like, yeah, totally. We've been married this long. I'm not gonna flinch at that anymore.
Oh yeah, you totally. If you can match the power of that talking hamburger helper hand, then. That's bigger than a Michelin
like a
star, man. That's
like a little Leatherface
hand.
So like the little hand has like a little apron, and So, but yeah, so that would be what I would pair with this. Oddly enough, and it's purely from a comfort standpoint, not because this movie is comforting, but I need I need comfort.
You need to be comforted.
In order to
Got
really
it.
continue to watch this movie. So
Okay.
that's my food pick for this movie. Who wants to go next?
Jaime can go. I can go last.
Okay, that's fine. It's like you were saying. I know that obviously barbecue would be the obvious, like pasta with Godfather.
Which is fine.
Yeah. But I wrote down. It's along the same lines, I guess. But like I guess I don't know why I had this recurring feeling of like. Maybe I think they were stuffed in sausage because I put turducken or boudin.
I love that.
That's very elevated.
I love that.
Yeah.
Wait, what is? I don't know what boudin is. What is that?
It's a kind of sausage.
It's a sausage, but it's like it's stuffed. It's a casing stuffed with rice and
it has
vegetables and sausage or like meat.
Yeah, it's not just straight meat. It's,
There's a lot of rice in it.
It's Louisiana thing, right?
It's very Cajun.
Yeah.
There's a place here near us, just outside Austin. It's called Stuffed. Yeah, they do Cajun. I had a friend of mine. He's big on that Cajun stuff. So I tried some of the boudin that he got from there, and it was pretty fucking good. So
you'll have to bring us some the next time you come back up. That's
for sure. Yeah, I can definitely do that.
I love boudin.
And so and the whole idea of something within something within something. That's like turducken. I mean, what else?
That does kind of line up with, I think.
Yeah.
To me, it seems like
it's like the frontage road of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre highway. It's like on the frontage road. It's
right.
It's close, but it's
parallel.
not
parallel.
It's not the same.
Yeah. But it's not people. So
right.
Yeah.
No, that's fair.
It's meat pretending to be other meat.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the other
like
white meat.
Yeah.
Because I guess humans also white meat. I guess technically.
Yep.
That sounds good.
That's my recommendation.
I like that. I think that could work. That would work well on a menu. What do you got?
So I thought of this actually like just an hour or two ago because we just had I have a Filipino pop-up with a couple of my friends that we have like very periodically these days. It's not super regular anymore because we don't have time or energy these days. But we started in the pandemic and we would pop up at different locations and sell Filipino food or Filipino-inspired food, as we like to call it, because it's not necessarily always authentic dishes. Anyway, the last one that we did a pop-up for is the dish that I thought of because I feel like it seems pretty apt. The version that we did with pork belly because that's the easier version, but the traditional original version you make with pig face. You literally like boil an entire head of a pig until it's tender, and then you kind of peel it off and chop it up into little chunks into this delicious dish called sisig. It's served on like a sizzling platter. It's all chopped up bits and pieces of face and ears and sometimes pork belly for fat. And it's all with diced onions and garlic and just, I think usually there's something spicy like Thai chilies or like bird's eye chili. The more traditional version, it was served with, it was actually cooked with the brains. I don't think as many people do that anymore. It's like substituted now for like the more modern mayonnaise instead for like that fatty feel to the mouth. And then some people, again, it depends on the loyalists and the traditionalists, but a lot of people serve it with like a fried egg on top to just kind of kick it up a little bit. So in the last pop-up, we served a version of that, but as like fried rice. So that's what I was thinking of it for here, just because of the pig face aspect of it. We didn't use pig face because that's a pain in the ass to cook and break down, whatever. But we used pork belly instead.
Yeah, that was what is that? Head cheese.
Head cheese. That's right. He talked about head cheese. It's not exactly the same, but same start.
Yeah, you the jowls. And
yeah. Because there's a lot of good stuff on the face. Yeah. I mean, he was.
He wasn't wrong.
Hitchhiker was right in that case. There's a lot of good stuff on there. Just most people don't think about it because it's horrifying. to think about.
Well, but then like Franklin says that, and he's like, "Oh, you eat it if you didn't know what it was."
Exactly.
Which is true.
Same with hot dogs and sausages.
If it's delicious, it's delicious.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep. Oh damn!
All right. I think it's a good. That is a good way to sort of finish off this Halloween talking about pig head. But yeah, I think this one. All-time classic.
And you've been waiting to do this one, haven't you?
I bet. I have been wanting to talk about this for some time.
Yeah.
I mean, I will forever watch this movie. I'll never get tired of this movie. This movie inspired me when I did my short film, my first one.
Mm-hmm.
What was that called again?
Double Exposure.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
which, like, not to say that. I mean, I'm no Toby Hooper, but. I also made the mistake.
It was good, bro. It was good.
But I made the mistake of filming in August.
just like Toby Hooper.
In the dead of the night.
Yeah. But you got to feel that pain to
that's right.
know what it, I mean, dude.
For your art. Yeah.
It was a good piece of work, man.
And to put context to it, it was a 24-hour marathon filming.
Not that one. That one was different.
Was it not?
No, that was not that.
Oh, I thought
that was the one. Double Exposure.
This had a deadline though, didn't it?
I mean, other than me needing to get it done.
I feel like there was.
No, not on that one.
Okay.
But the only thing that, I mean, like I gave myself self-imposed deadline because it was one of those things where if I did not force myself to try to do it, film it, and do all the things with it, it would never get done. So I made a schedule and a budget and everything and put it all together and said, like, this is when this needs to be done. And I wanted it to feel like grimy and grungy, like Texas Chainsaw. Mm-hmm. We filmed it in August and it looked like it wasn't going to be so bad until it rained like 2 days before. And then the ground was like muggy and hot. There were mosquitoes. Like we filmed from 6 p.m. until 7 the next morning.
Okay, that one with the giant mosquitoes.
Yes,
right?
there were mosquitoes so big that you could hear them on the microphones. Like they were being picked up by all our microphones. I had to go in and I had to take them all out because it was so loud.
I was working that night and I was really sad I couldn't go out to help until he told me about the mosquitoes, and then I was like, maybe next time.
Yeah, it was one of the worst experiences that I think you could have had, but everybody enjoyed it. But like, I think to what you're saying, I think you are right in that like everybody looked tired and everybody looked disgruntled on film, but
it adds to the feeling you're trying to, it translates to film, I guess. If you put them in uncomfortable, exactly.
Yeah. And so, at the end of the day,
like off in this movie.
That's right.
I feel like, if I could ever do more stuff, I would want to emulate, and try to follow in the steps of like Toby Hooper. I mean, like I said, I'll never be a Toby Hooper. The guy was like, I would say in a lot of ways, he was the most gentle, like maybe almost too nice he was very pushed around in Hollywood because
he was just a sweet man.
He was just a really nice guy. Like, and I think that's generally the case for a lot of the people in these types of movies and horror movies.
They chewed him up.
Yeah, they kind of chewed him up and spit him out. And like, he never really had a fair shot at what he could have done in Hollywood. But he still holds like some of the most classic titles for people like us with Poltergeist and The Fun House and Texas Chainsaw,
the hotel one.
Eaten Alive and Salem's Lot. But like at the end of the day, I feel like wherever Toby Hooper is in our universe or galaxy after he passed away, like I'm sure he's like has to know that like the imprint that he put like on film and cinema and everything that came with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is like, it's like a legacy that only like all of us would be like, man, I wish I just had like a little tiny legacy that could could have that sort of amplitude in people's lives and whatnot. So
right.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. R.I.P.
It is a classic, and it will forever be a classic. So
we all have Leatherface in our hearts.
that's right. So
or in the pot.
well, all right, time to go look at all the candy that was gathered this evening and make
throw
a
away the
plan
candy
for,
corn.
Yeah,
Just throw away the candy corn, man. I just no.
Tootsie Rolls.
Yep. But all right, well, let's
all right, close it up.
time to close up the shop and put away the fine cutlery of chainsaws, and I gotta go fix
machetes.
I gotta go fix up the door because somebody messed up the door on the way out. So
I'm calling it now. We're road trip to the gas station. I don't know when, but we got to make that happen.
Special episode.
Yeah, we could do a road trip episode at the gas station. So.
Yep. Karen thinks I'm crazy for wanting to eat at a barbecue place where it was, filmed of cannibals.
It's not bad.
No, it's good.
Oh, they have cabins. They have cabins, I think.
Yeah, she said. Yeah. She said, I'm not doing that. So it's going to just be a day trip to go have some barbecue and check the place out. So
yep. No, sounds good to me. So coming in 2025.
Yeah. Whenever y'all ready.
Podcast road trip.
Yep.
All right. We will see everybody
Happy
at
Halloween.
the next shift.
Okay. Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Later.